Oh, gosh. We do. That's right. I hope you had a good lunch and you got some fresh air and your brains and minds and hearts are all clear for the afternoon's work. And we'll turn it over to our most capable Miss Soldera.
All right, well, at the beginning, I encouraged a discussion for our information session, so I'm pleased that we're having so much discussion. An update of where we're at for now. So the two budgets have been essentially amended requisition-wise, three without affecting, the third one doesn't affect the requisition. The two changes that were made are both in regional budgets. So we are now at a 4.45 total percent increase, and you can see here the impact on the individual areas. So that is where we're at as of this moment.
Thank you.
And so I'm just going to give everybody a couple of minutes to look at it, because it's not on the website, because I'm not that fast, and I don't do website work. And so we will continue discussions this afternoon, and that number may go down or may go up, because we do have a few other items that have been brought forward, have been specifically being brought back for reconsideration. So I will keep you as updated as I can throughout the day, and after, when you guys have a break, I'll do some quick math. So, all right?
There's no way you can have the computer over there hooked up to that, right?
I tend not to do super great work when other people are watching what I'm
Okay.
doing, so. I'd rather bring it back to you over time.
That's how we're used to it at North Cowichan. Plunks in the number and we can see it, and then, oh, we take that out, and so we'll
see.
get used to your ways.
We'll see. All right, so I'm going to flip back to where we're at. So we were on function 285, regional parkland acquisition, and we had a motion on that just before lunch. So moving down, the next item is in the building inspection category. So in building inspection, in the previous year, we funded a portion of a position through operating reserve. So this year, we had to increase the requisition to cover that portion. We also put back up the legal fees, knowing that there's some potential for legal fee increases for the year. I'm going to keep going unless anybody stops me. So moving down, the next items are primarily fire department items. So they've been discussed with individual area directors, and so I will continue on. Next item we get to is function 405, Cowichan Lake Recreation. The commission recommended doing a transfer to their reserve to replace the cladding on their building in the future. And again, I'm going to keep going just because these don't affect the majority. And so, yeah, I'm happy to stop. I'm just getting to Kerry Park now, assuming that's where Director Acton is. Oh, 405, sure, absolutely.
For
Madam Chair?
405, through the chair to staff, for 405, this includes 5 complexes, right? The budget for Lake Cowichan Recreation?
I don't understand 5 complexes.
Well, it includes the Yubo Hall, the Missachi Hall, the Honeymoon Bay Hall, the Lake Cowichan Hall, and the arena. Is that right?
Yes.
Under this one function. Thank you.
As well as a 4-lane bowling alley.
Do they still have the Yubo bowling alley? They still have pin people? Gotta go play there sometime. No, I don't want to be pin setter.
All right, so no more questions about that. Next is Kerry Park Recreation. In Kerry Park, there was a staff restructuring supplemental item totaling almost $119,000. That was approved by the commission. Director Acton, did you?
Sure. Could I have just a refresh our memory on what that position was? I thought that was the upper management position. It's not? There's an additional? This is the one we want. Okay.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Yes.
So through to the director, this staff restructuring is a number of frontline positions at Kerry Park. So there's no one specific position. This is around programming and the fact that programming is at capacity.
All right, so moving on. Oh,
Director Smith?
Since the regional recreation hasn't fitted into any of this yet, would this be a wise move at this time to do this staff restructuring when regional recreation will be changing? Yes, I know that the funding, it'll be funded differently in the future under regional recreation. So will there also be under regional recreation different opportunities to pool some of the resources when it comes to the staff within all the 9 regional significant facilities? Like, are we putting the cart before the horse here?
Mr. Elzinga?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through the director. It is a ways down the road to be able to talk about staff efficiencies. So as a bit of a preview of some of the report coming forward, regional recreation obviously has already had some determination around funding, and we are now talking about governance. And I anticipate that one of the points to be brought forward is that the existing 9 regionally significant facilities would maintain their own current staff structures. So at this point, I can't see how this would impact upon regional recreation.
Thank you, Mr. Elzinga. Director Sebring?
In anticipation that we're done with Kerry Park, I just want to move ahead to 420 Cowichan Community Center. The maintenance staff position, I think we need to explain this one to the board because, or to the committee here, because at the last meeting, this committee decided not to approve the other half of that full-time equivalent half position. Half was supposed to go to the center and half was supposed to go here. Mr. Elzinga, maybe you want to just elaborate on how this is going to work now. Is this actually somebody working there 20 hours a week, or is it somebody who's working 20 that's going to 40? What's the operational implication?
Madam Chair, through to the director. So the initial proposal was for a full-time position with .7 here at the Ingram Street office, take care of maintenance projects here, with .3 being at the Cowichan Community Center. With no approval of the position here at Ingram Street, the Cowichan Community Center Commission looked at that. You can't really hire for a .3 position, so we looked at a .5 position for the Cowichan Community Center, which will be doing projects specifically at the Cowichan Community Center.
Thank you. I just wanted to sort of clarify that in case anybody remembered that that was a half and half split, sort of.
and to elaborate that, the other half of that position had no motion made with it, so it will be in the next set of reports that we'll be looking at with, on today's agenda. We're looking at all of the supplemental requests, so I'll bring
Oh,
that
so we get to deny it again.
So there was no motion last time, so.
Oh, there wasn't?
It was not moved or seconded, so.
So it wasn't moved to approve it, so the inference was it was denied.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so at the Cowichan Community Center, they have, oh, sorry.
I'll go to Director Acton and then Smith.
I was just going to continue on with that function, but yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Uh,
Well, I have a question on shore planning.
Are you deferring to Director Smith, or do you want to make your motions?
Are we done with Cowichan Community Center?
Nope.
Okay, I'll wait till we're done.
Okay, Director Smith.
So I'm looking at 200,000 for a parking lot replacement, which would be a capital expenditure, and yet 107,000 is being transferred to capital reserve. Would not the capital reserve be able to fund this 200,000? Can you just explain that there?
Absolutely. So the commission looked at the budget that was proposed for the year. In previous years, they have spent money specifically for capital projects. They had those capital projects were complete. And so they decided that instead of reducing the requisition this year, they would keep the requisition the same. They would do their capital project out of their same requisition, and they would still have enough funds in there to transfer to capital reserve for future capital replacement.
If I may, Madam Chair, there's
you may.
considerable history there. Going back to about 2012, we decided, we being the commission at that time, to start building a capital reserve on the understanding that that facility was then already nearing its statistical end of life. And it's not to say we got to tear it down tomorrow and rebuild. The staff there are doing a phenomenal job of maintaining it. But we started putting money away into a reserve, I think in 2013, Mr. Elzinga can correct me, somewhere in there. And we've tried to do that every year. That's just an ongoing thing, and it's not, I mean, it's flagged as a capital reserve, but it's not really for capital projects. It's for basically the facility replacement when that time comes. And every year we play a little bit with how much we put in. We haven't put in as much as we'd like. We haven't put in as much as we said we would. But whenever there's any elasticity in that budget, we dump it in that reserve just to try to make sure that we keep feeding it. So that's the history there.
Thank you, Director Sebring.
All right, so I believe we're now done function 420. And so the next thing on the list is way down. We're now at Shawnigan Lake Recreation, and in that the commission made a couple of decisions with respect to the way that they would, or some projects that they would like to do.
What number is it?
Item 46, or function 464, Shawnigan Lake Recreation.
Thank you.
And
Yes.
Yeah, sorry, 464, I just need to know what that is, acoustic. Just bring me up to date on that. I'm not against it, I just like a little bit of explanation as to acoustic improvements, $40,000.
Mr. Elzinga? We'll let staff first.
And I would certainly look for the director to add on to this as well, so through the chair to Director Wilson. This was a supplemental item that was not brought forward by staff, but was actually brought forward by the commission at the commission meeting. So my understanding of this particular project is that they're looking for sound improvements in 4 different rooms. And so this addresses sound improvements in 2 of those 4 rooms. I believe it's the round theater room as well as the lobby. And it looks like the director is in agreement.
Director Nicholson?
I would just like to know what a scrub machine is.
Oh, I can answer that. It's like a Zamboni for floors. Can you picture it?
You sit up, right?
Well, you
Does it
push
drive
it though.
itself?
No, it's one of those big mowers, floor thing.
Shiny up the floor thing.
Yeah, and they're expensive. And ours is getting old, and they want to use the older, keep one at LC Miles and one at the community center.
Director Smith?
We've gone past a budget function that I was wanting to pull or to have a discussion on, which was 328. So it's the bylaw enforcement. And I had indicated it was one of the ones that I would like to have us have another look at. For me, I think that the budget function 328 bylaw enforcement 2020 draft budget should be amended for the transfer from operating reserve of 45,000 and increase the vehicle expense by 45,000. I think that when we first looked at this, we were a little off and didn't realize that The 45,000 could come out of operating reserve, and we had missed that, and I would like to revisit that and put that forward, that we put that back in. That supplemental item for function 328. So the motion would be that, that function, budget function 328, bylaw enforcement 2020 budget, draft budget be amended to transfer from operating reserve 45,000 and increase vehicle expense by 45,000.
There's a seconder. Is that correct, Director Melanie Dardino? DiNardo? You're seconding it. And to this motion. Shall I call the question? All in favor? Opposed? That carries.
Just for the committee's knowledge, this item actually is included on our list of supplementary items that were not approved, so it would have come forward in the next section as well. So if we do bypass and miss any of those ones, they will come forward in the next section as well. That's great.
Okay, carry on. Do you have something you want to bring up on one of?
Thank you. Number 478, Cowichan Station Association, Area B. I would like to increase the requisition to $7,697.
So to that much rather than by
To that much.
Why that very specific amount?
It's the maximum.
Is there a seconder? Seconded. Any debate? Question? All in favor? Opposed? That one carries. Sorry, did I miss something? I'm asking you, Director Nicholson.
Thank you.
You're so welcome.
This is very much along the same lines as Director Acton's motion, and I sent a motion through to Angie and Ms. Legault and Shannon, that budget function 469 Cowichan Station Area Association Area E be amended to increase the requisition by $3,500 and increase the grant to the organization by $3,500.
Is there a seconder? Seconded. Any questions or comments? Okay, all in favor? Opposed? That motion carries. Director Acton.
And to balance things out, I would like to decrease the requisition for number 112 Grant and Aid Area B to $30,000. Look, less $10,000?
Yeah.
Have you got that, Ms. Legault?
112 Area B.
That's okay.
Well, I'm just bringing it,
Not quite to the top. That remains to be seen.
we
So,
have till tomorrow at
it's-
4:30.
It's moved and seconded. Is there any debate on the motion?
It's okay. It's okay.
All in favor? Opposed? I want to know what was put in the dessert at lunch. I'm quite serious. Carry on, Ms. Soldera.
All right, so I'm going to look and see where we were. Whew, we were way up on 464, I believe. All right, so looking, grants, we just moved. I'm going to continue down.
As she's continuing, shout out if there's something that you think's been missed.
So the next big one was an increase in the grant to the South Cowichan Community Policing,
Number
495. Continuing to go down, and at our solid waste function, we have guardrail replacement being funded with debt, and so it's an increase to the requisition for the debt payments. Very small increase in function 532, function 540. Oh,
Yes, Director. No, I need.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would just, there is the Cowichan Community Policing, and I know there isn't any increase, but we had yesterday at Electoral Area Services that grant and aid was given to Cowichan Community Policing from an area. How does that work? So there's one area that just does a grant and aid, and then another area that does a function. Is there like a policy, or how does that work?
This is 496.
so Cowichan Community Policing is North Cowichan, City of Duncan, and Area D, I believe.
That's correct.
And
Yeah.
Area E is not a participant in the function, but made a motion to make a grant and aid for that function in recognition of I assume in recognition of some of the services that are provided to Area E.
So do they have to join the function, or you can just make a grant and aid to anything
So
and
grants
get
and
the
aid.
same services? Because we are in the function, so I'm curious about that.
So I would assume that it's not the same level of service. I'm not the expert on this, but I would assume that it's not the same level of service being provided to Area E residents as they're not participants. Directors can make grants and aid to functions provided that their area does not already pay into that function. So should you have wished to make a grant and aid to the community policing, we would have told you that that is ultra vires, so that's not in keeping with the legislation. But because Area E is not a participant, it's okay.
Curious, thank you.
Director Stone.
I just looked up that function. Electoral Area D is I guess the requisition when the service was established is .0152, whereas City of Duncan is .0351, so maybe that.
My clarification is if you're not in a function, can we make grants and aids and get that service? Whereas I had to go into a function to get that service.
Okay.
Other people can just make a grant and aid and get the service. So, and functions, I'm never thrilled with because you can never get out of them. So I was just curious on that. I've never seen that happen before.
Do you want to say anything?
I mean, it's a historical artifact, and we certainly don't get the level of service you do. That contribution is specific for Neighborhood Watch services that they have been providing, the signs and so forth.
I'll be consulting on the service that we get. I'm meeting with them today, but I'll leave it the way it is. Thank you.
Carry on.
All right, so I'll go back to function 540. The directors asked that a request had been put forward to fund the update to the plan through gas tax, and the directors asked that it be funded through requisition instead. And I believe Director Salmon.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Director Salmon.
So we had a discussion, A, B, and C about this. I'd just like to move that we amend that to 50,000 instead of 87,000. If I have a seconder.
I see a seconder to the amendment. Do you want to speak to your reasoning to the amendment?
It's, well, the South Sector Liquid Waste Management Plan, ongoing for quite some time. And will continue for quite some time. It's multi-phase. We got some feedback and just had a discussion, and it seems like the urgency for this year, that 50,000 would be adequate.
Thank you. Just for clarification, the South Sector Liquid Waste Management, we started over a year ago. Yeah, and at that time, we didn't have enough fund available. So with a limited of $60,000, we had to actually split them into two phases. Two phases as part of stage one. Normally, we do it in three phases. But for next year, we are planning to combine a stage 2 and a stage 3 and get over with it. Because, you know, the last or the current liquid waste master plan for South Sector dates back to 80s. It's outdated and it doesn't actually provide us with kind of a glance in the future. What are we going to do? Where are we going? So having, you know, a limited kind of fund available, again, I have to divide them into phases and it drags on for another 3, 4, 5 years. And the danger is if we prolong that one, regulation changes, all of the assumptions that I made, you know, for stage 1 will be obsolete. So the danger is, or the risk is, I have to start all over again.
So, Mr. Hamatami, am I understanding that you think that it should stay at the 87,000, or you're happy with the 50,000?
That's the minimum I need.
The 87,000 is
That's
the
right.
minimum you need in order to not have to start all over?
That's
again?
right.
Okay, thank you for that input. Director Sebring, you had your hand up? Director Acton?
Madam Chair. My understanding is that there is no required set time of when this should happen. And the feedback that I've gotten from the community is, and some input from engineering, that these are plans that are 25, 30 years down the road. And why are we not focusing on perhaps like a 5-year plan, something that's just a little, that satisfies our provincial requirements to create a plan, but then also is realistic. So keeping that in mind, you know, the plan doesn't need to be a 25-year plan. And this amount of money, as I understand it, was actually just going to be put aside as well. That there wasn't going to
Well,
be work this year, that we were putting it aside.
I think what I heard the staff, Mr. Hadmini, say is that this is part of a plan to get the plan done, and he's incrementally building the fund, so it's not, if we don't continue to
Well-
do this, it's not going to happen? Is
Right,
that-
but we just met with staff and they said that this was gonna be saved for 2 years from now, and
Within the next 2 years, they hope, you know, to have it. But again, a little bit of clarification. Yes, the plan actually looks at the horizon year of 30, 35 years. However, there is a 5-year interval in that plan. So basically, it tells you that what is going to happen, based on our assumption, the population increase and the demand, what we expect in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, 30 years. So, but the problem is, you know, if I actually delay that, and I wait 2 years from now to actually continue with the stage 2, regulation changes. So I have to go back to stage 1 and redo whatever I've done so far. So again, it drags on forever. You know, another 10 years, we are the same place. That's what I want to actually
Yeah, you
bring
can
it
have
to your
a
attention.
follow-up. I'll just say that earlier when I said that 99% of the time down the road, I think this is one of those times that we're getting good advice from professional staff that are paid to give us that professional advice, but
well,
may
I'd
have a
just like to
follow-up.
point out that this is A, B, and C, and we're going from a requisition of 0 to this amount. So this is a big increase. Just being cognitive of what the discussion is around this table and the likelihood, and yeah, the regulations could change, and they often do. And then a new government could come in and say, we don't even need it as well.
Well, I actually think it would be a sad day for Canada if a new government said we didn't need solid waste management. But anyway, so. I'm not sure what,
Was there a
so there's
motion?
an amendment. I do now. I'd like to hear from Mr. Kieber first, though, Mr. Director Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I just want to clarify, there's been a few things said that's not quite accurate. In 2019, the requisition was 103,000. what was being proposed in 2020 is an increase of 87,000 up to 193. So it wasn't going from zero, this is an increase from 100,000.
So this is the second step, Mr. Kieber, that was referred
As
to.
towards the actual plan, Mr. Hatami, I can't answer that, and Mr. Hatami could. I'm just talking about what the requisition limit was last year versus what it is this year.
Did you have something, Ms. Director Salmon? Oh, Director Wilson, sorry. Post-lunch.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The South Sector directors are united on this, that we've looked at the plans very carefully. We've looked at 30 years down the road. And to be quite honest, I don't think that any expert in the world can look 30 years down the road and predict what will or will not happen. And this amount of money just to provide a plan is really, in our opinion, far too much. The 30-year extension that we're looking at is far too much. I would much rather see a 5-year plan, and then as Mr. Hatami has said, then they'll look at it again, but we don't need a 30-year plan in the first place. Let's get a 5-year plan in place and revisit that in 4 years' time. An increase of this amount to almost $200,000 really for another plan, another study, I'm sorry, is too much, and I can't support this. One of the things we looked at was the way that Phase 2 and Phase 3, where the whole of Shawnigan Lake is supposedly going to be ringed by a pipeline to carry sewage from central points. Let's take that in the overall picture. If the big one hits, we're then left with this fractured system which won't work. Whereas if we can, rather than build these huge centralized systems, smaller systems which will cope with the local conditions, that would be far better. But I can't see that another $87,000 is sustainable just for more reports.
Mr. Hatami, please. I was just going to ask you to come up there. You read my mind.
Thank you. Just a correction. Long-range planning with a horizon of 30 years doesn't mean that it's only focused on 30 years. As I mentioned, there is a 5-year interval. And if you follow the plan, it tells you the short-term, mid-term, and long-term. So that's not fair to say that it looks just only at what is going to happen in 30 years. Nobody has the crystal ball to see what is going to happen in 10, 15 years from now. Technology changes, demand may change, but based on the information that we have today, we project that into the future, similar to any OCP. OCP has a horizon year of 20 years. Normally, master plans go 10 years beyond that, so up to 30 years. But again, there is an interval, 5 years, short-term, mid-term. So you have to look at that, and all of those options that you mentioned, yes, it is considered into that. But what you look at the 30-year plan, maybe is deceiving, but you have to look at the intervals in between. Thank you.
So before you sit down, Mr. Hatimi, as a municipal director, I find it awkward because I'm not sure the right questions to ask, yet under the charter, I'm here to cast my vote on this. So I'd like to ask you, this plan is coming from regulations that the province is putting on
Part
the
of it,
district?
yes.
Yes.
It's required that we have to update that, even though it's not a written kind of act to say that you have to do it every 5 years. But normally in 5 years' time, the regulation changes and the population demand changes, so that's the norm. Every 5 years, we amend that plan. Means we go back and we look at our assumptions, look at the new regulations, and how it affects actually our plan and our future to go forward.
Right. In a sense, it's the asset management.
Well, asset management actually feeds into that. Asset management deals with the existing infrastructure. We are talking about future, proposed, what we need. Because if a community is closed nothing happened. And when you look at the population growth in a closed community is death rate and birth rate. But unfortunately, there's no community out there or in the world that is closed. So people move into the community, people move out of the community, businesses come into the community, and they bring actually that demand. So we look at all of these factors when we do our population forecast and the demand. Again, at the end of the day, that's an assumption, and that's based on the information that we have. But every 5 years, when we go back and we look at that, we find out if our assumptions were right, we were on the mark, or underestimated the growth or overestimated. That's ongoing. Master plan amendment is happening every municipality that I'm aware of.
Thank you. So we have a motion on the floor. Anyone want to speak to the motion? Director Sebring.
This is, and you've identified it, Madam Chair, it's difficult for us as municipal directors to be voting on electoral area issues. I mean, we don't have any, to use a term from earlier in the day, skin in the game. We're not paying into this. I don't think this is a shared service among the three southern electoral areas. I come back to the principle that I always use when I scratch my head over these things, and that is the electoral areas or the directors for the electoral areas that are affected are accountable to their ratepayers and their citizens. And if the South End directors are unanimous in the recommendation that's before us, then irrespective, and with all due respect to staff, irrespective of some of the concerns that Mr. Hattani has raised, I would say, you know what, I'd support those area directors, understanding that, if we run into major problems or if this, in the long term, creates cost increases, because, as Mr. Hattani has said, this may end up having us start the process over again, and potentially there's issues with that. Those South End directors are going to wear that too. So that's where I am with it. I'll support the motion that's there. Thank you.
Director Staples.
So while I recognize what's being talked about in terms of what Director Sebring and Director Marsh have brought up, I also recognize that we're all around this board because we bring different perspectives, and that's the whole point of having a board and having these discussions at the board. And one thing that I've learned in municipal governance in terms of future planning for our future is that there was generations where that wasn't done very effectively in a lot of areas, and we're all paying for it now, including our taxpayers. And so that's something that I've learned. Mm-hmm. And so I bring that perspective forward, that this, and looking to staff as I don't believe that staff is trying to bring things, particularly around these types of issues, that aren't really important to the health of the community overall and the health of those areas, building into the future. And so when I look at the things that we're faced with at our tables and the costs that we're faced with in our communities, because these things weren't done by other people, I respectfully disagree with the motion that's on the floor.
Director Salmon.
Maybe just a final comment, just so everyone's clear, as Mr. Keeber said, we're talking about an increase of about 50% to this function. So it was 103,000, I believe. We're saying we're going to increase it by 50,000, so it's a 50% increase. Mm-hmm. So that's the motion.
Yeah, and I think we're close to the question, but I think that there's different ways of looking at it. A number is a number, and generally, if we think the number's too high today, in a decade, it's going to be way higher because we'll be in worse shape. So there's just different ways of looking at it, and I think it's fair, and I'm really grateful that some of us that are municipal directors are speaking about, when I come here, and even at my other table, I think of the region when I make my decisions, and And I think that's what we're meant to do, and that's why we're here. If the province wanted only electoral area directors to decide on these things, that's the way it would be set up. And could you listen instead of speak when I'm speaking? I have a right to speak to the motion, just like everybody else, and that's what I'm doing. So would anyone else like to speak before I call the question? Yes, yes, I think that's a good idea. Could you read us the motion, please, Ms. Legault?
Thank you, Madam Chair. It is to decrease the requisition amount for the supplemental for the plan amendment for the liquid waste plan South Sector from $87,370 to $50,000.
So, all those in favor? All those opposed? So that motion carries. Carry on, walking us along this merry path.
All right, so next ones I come to are in the Engineering Services Department. We have some office upgrades funded through operating reserve, and then we have a junior operator and technologist position. These are allocation budgets, and so are funded by the specific utility functions that receive services from them. And I believe that Director Smith wants to put forward a motion with respect to a vehicle supplemental request.
Director Smith.
Thank you very much. I'd like to recommend that the budget function 576 Engineering Services Utilities 2020 draft budget be amended to transfer from operating reserve 50,000 and increase vehicle expense by 50,000.
Is there a seconder? Second? Yes. Maybe Director Smith first and then you, Director Morrison.
I feel that we, when we first looked at this, I think that we missed that it was coming out of operating reserve and it wasn't an increase to tax requisition. So that's why I'm bringing it forward at this time. Thank you.
Director Salmon. Oh, I'm sorry. I said Director Morrison could speak to it as a seconder, and then I'll go to Director Salmon.
Just to confirm, this will be on the list for later, so we're just dealing with it now, correct? Okay, thank you.
Oh, well, here we are. Director Salmon.
Just to be clear, though, it's still money we're spending. It comes out of reserve. It means that money's not available in reserve for other things. So it's not, just because it's not out of the requisition doesn't mean we're not spending it. Am I right?
We're not increasing taxation to do it, and it is a core service. Our engineering department is a core service, and it's very important that we have the staff in safe vehicles.
Director Nicholson.
So we have not approved yet a vehicle for bylaw enforcement, is that correct?
It doesn't.
We did.
So,
When did we just do that?
so, but before it was on the list of maybes that we were gonna look at the end of the day?
I'm totally lost in this.
So both there were, I believe, 3 vehicles proposed this year, all to be funded from operating reserve. There was no motion made during the regular budget deliberations, so they will be brought forward. Our staff was hoping to bring quite a number of those back for further discussion and reconsideration under the supplemental request section. So Director Smith was proactive and had a list of ones that she wanted to make sure got put on this list, and so is asking that the motion be brought forward now. So.
Okay,
But can I clarify, if we were to wait till later, we would see all of them together and be able to decide on a
Correct.
priority? Thank you.
right,
Director
so,
Nicholson.
so I am concerned about this.
We realize you have a motion on the floor, and we're debating it right now. So
And
it's
I'm
Director
concerned, I
Nicholson.
am concerned about this motion. I was confused if we have already done this once before already. I in particular am concerned because we have, I think, planned a fleet plan, a review and a fleet coordination plan or something. And I think that it would be useful to think about the fleet in general, and in particular, of course, I'm concerned about greenhouse gas emissions and how that plays into this whole thing. So I don't like making these one-off decisions without sort of an overall understanding of fleet management.
So you're making a motion to table until the time that Ms. Soldera is saying they'll all come up
That's a
together?
darn good idea.
Is there a seconder? There's several seconders. So to the motion to table for later in the meeting. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. So carry on.
All right, so essentially all we have left are the utility functions, so within our sewer and water utilities. And unless there's any specific ones that anybody would like to speak to with those? No? Your update for today, I have on my separate little computer, while nobody's watching me, I've done the math, and we are now at 4.37. That's where we're sitting at the moment. And so then I will move us on to R4, if I may.
Yes, you may. Thank you very much.
And so R4 is the supplementary items that were brought forward for discussion. So the senior management team reviewed the supplementary items and ranked them into Tier 1 of prime importance, Tier 2, and then Tier 3. None of the Tier 3 supplemental items were specifically brought forward with a motion from staff, although 2 actually were approved, brought forward with motions either by a director or by a commission. And so I have prepared, attached to the report for your review today, is a list of the approved supplemental requests, which I have here on the screen. We also have a listing of, there were a few supplemental requests that were specifically considered, and a motion was made defeating the supplemental requests. There are 5 of those.
And if someone wanted to bring any of those back, they can do that?
Absolutely. Oh, I should defer to Ms. Lejeune on that one, but I believe so. We have the listing of deferred supplemental requests, which are included in the next section. So I have included a specific motion for each of those, should the committee wish to consider them. And then we have the listing of supplemental requests that no motion was made for. So I've sorted these in accordance with Tier 2 and Tier 1. As I said, Tier 2 and Tier 3. Tier 3 projects, there was no specific motion from staff. With respect to the Tier 2 projects, there were several replacement vehicles in Function 325, Community Planning, in Function 328, Bylaw Enforcement, and in Function 576, which is our engineering function. All 3 of those were to be funded from operating reserve, and I know that, especially in the case of engineering, and I don't want to speak for them, and they are here if anyone would like more information, but with the hiring of new staff, it would also be good to have new vehicles. And in the case of the bylaw enforcement officer, I believe at the last meeting, the bylaw enforcement officer did speak to the difficulties that the soils inspector was having in reaching some of the locations. So, with respect to these, I would invite at this time would be the perfect time for any of the supplemental requests that have not yet been approved or have not been approved. If there's any specific ones that any member would like to bring forward for further discussion.
So point of order then, for clarity, you're asking us to go through attachment D first?
You can go through
being the
whichever
ones
ones you would like. So attachment A were the approved ones. I'll go back to the beginning.
Yeah.
And so, assuming no further revisiting, we've revisited several of those already through our discussions throughout the morning and so far this afternoon. Looking at attachment B, those are the ones that were specifically defeated. So maybe I'll leave those up in case there's any ones that anyone would like to reconsider.
I would like to hear what disadvantaged the defeating the corporate performance management software might put us in.
Which attachment are you in, Madam Chair?
I am in attachment B, I think.
The very first one here on our list of defeated
It's under
items, under
general
attachment B.
government.
The general government, right?
And I would defer to Mr. Carruthers for this one.
Oh, Mr. Carruthers.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you repeat your question, Madam Chair?
I'm curious, the corporate performance management software is only at $10,000. It's a tier 2, but I'd like to know what disadvantage we might be in. And the reason I'm saying it is often when a municipality or a regional district makes a mistake, it happens at that, sometimes at that level, it's not caught. So is this something that could get us into, is there risk involved, and what is it in not doing this?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So what this would be a kind of a multi-level platform that would allow us corporately to monitor, track, and report on our various progresses in relation to, at the highest level, the board's strategic plan, at a more operational level, departmental and divisional work plans. These systems can be structured so that we can use it to report out to the public and to report out to the board on how we've been doing to achieve the board's strategic plan. We can layer it down so that I can work with my general managers to keep on top of tracking performance of their departmental work plans, and then vice versa, the general managers can use it to track the work plans of their division managers. So it's a corporate performance tracking system. It's automated. Currently we do it, but we do it in an ad hoc approach. I do it with my general managers with spreadsheets that are all developed individually and all developed manually, and they're in many cases different. This would give us an online platform, opportunities to filter information so that we can produce reports when asked either by staff or directors. So it just optimizes our ability to monitor and report on our performance across the organization.
And would it be fair to say that it would save staff time in the report out?
I believe there would be efficiencies in that they would simply go online and be able to enter their information, not having to go into a spreadsheet and print it
Collate it
and produce it, and then we can access it on the screens without having to print documents out. It's just a much more streamlined way of doing it, and you can tie the departmental and the divisional objectives to the corporate strategic plan as well when the board gets that established. So.
Okay, Director Stone.
Sorry, through to the CAO. So this is, I'm sure you've talked with our CAO about Cascade. Is this a similar type system?
It's a similar system, yeah.
Okay.
Well, I actually would like to move that we fund that. Nobody's going to second it. Okay. Director Smith.
Thank you very much. On attachment D, I would like to bring back function 576, utility vehicle replacement under engineering services utilities of 50,000 coming out of operating reserve. We don't even know where we are.
Are you allowing us to jump around like this?
Whatever the pleasure of the chair.
So the board tabled this motion so that we could consider the other motions regarding vehicles. Can you lead us in and tell us what the other vehicles are?
Sure.
Because I don't think I can do that.
Absolutely. So looking at attachment D, and I do have it here on the screen. So we do have a replacement vehicle in the community planning department, a replacement vehicle in our bylaw enforcement department, which there was a motion earlier today to approve coming from operating reserve, and a utility vehicle replacement in our engineering services utility functions.
And they're all tier 2.
And, sorry, and I missed one. And thank you to Mr. Farquhar. We actually have one a little higher up here, and I'll just circle it with my hand, in the Parks and Trails division. And that one was not from operating reserve, it was proposed to be funded from requisition. And so there are some staff here who can speak much better than I can to the need for those vehicles within individual apartments or individual departments, should the committee wish.
Director Morrison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be brief. I support the engineering services vehicle replacement. We've authorized 2 technologists, I believe, in the department. Our citizenry and our customers demand that people are responding 24/7. We need reliable vehicles. This is something that's needed. If you have to be able to put staff in vehicles in order to do their job. I don't think there's any question about the demonstrated need for the positions, and given that it's a reserve cost, and yes, it is dollars, but reserves are appropriately spent on one-time purchases and costs like this. So I think I would ask everyone to support this particular purchase. And secondarily, yes, we could do a whole bunch of things around fleet. We can save costs. We've all been to the conferences where fleet managers have come and made their presentations, but that requires either hiring a consultant or hiring someone to be a fleet manager, and we're not in that position. I think it wouldn't be accepted by this board, so I would encourage everyone to support this purchase.
Anyone else have anything to add? Director Acton.
Thank you. Well, I think Director Nicholson brings up a good point that we should be looking at this all together, and we should be looking at it in response. Like, we have declared a climate emergency, so we should have a policy that all our vehicles are electric, and they actually start to pay for themselves if you use them enough. My electric car, for every $100 that I used to spend on our previous car, I spend $10 in electricity. So at the end of the month, you're paying for a car payment. But, and I don't know that you actually need to hire a big consultant to figure this out. It's pretty, if we looked at our fleet as hear me out for a second. If we looked at it as a hotel, these are rooms and they're empty. And when they're not being used, we're losing money. And so when they're parked back there between 9 to 5, we are losing money. So how are we maximizing on the product or the vehicles that we do have? We could be using them, we could be sharing them, cross uses, whatever. And they should be out all the time. You shouldn't be able to park amongst 10 vehicles back there at a given time. So, yeah, it's really unfortunate. We're kind of, I feel like we're going a little backwards here on this topic.
Anyone else? Director Nicholson?
Thank you. Could staff clarify? I recall somewhere in the budget material there was a notion about doing a vehicle plan. Was there not? Or did I imagine that?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So believe me, fleet is a topic of conversation amongst your staff on a regular basis. In an ideal world, we would love to have a fleet management strategy. It does take resources. Currently, we have a number of divisions that all own vehicles in this department. We've had various ad hoc systems of managing those fleet vehicles, and it's very difficult because of resources. We don't have anyone dedicated centrally to be managing our fleet. And so as a result, our different divisions do their purchasing. And I can assure the board that our staff do share vehicles. We consider that at all times where we can share pooled vehicles between different divisions, but many of our vehicles are specialty vehicles. Our building inspection vehicles are set up to have their remote workplaces set up inside them, our utility vehicles. So where we can share them, we do share them. There are times, I agree, that the vehicles are sitting in the parking lot, but we have looked at any number of combinations of ways to share our vehicles. We also, at every opportunity, will buy electric vehicles for our fleet. One of the limiting factors right now is our ability to charge those electric vehicles, and we're currently looking at installing the infrastructure that would allow us to do that for our fleet vehicles. So it's like every other demand that this regional district has. All of these initiatives take time and take effort, and this is one that has just absolutely not been able to rise to the priority list of all of our staff to be able to tackle. If you want a true fleet management system, I'm going to suggest that you're going to need some software, and you're going to need a program to help us manage and dispatch our fleet accordingly. In the meantime, you know, you look at the analogy, if it's not broke, or, you know, don't fix it. I think we're doing a reasonable job of managing our fleet, quite honestly. We're taking opportunities to buy electric vehicles when we can. We're sharing vehicles when we can. We have extremely competitive processes when we purchase our new vehicles. So if I was to say, in terms of this entire organization, our highest priority, I think we're doing okay in terms of, in relation to other functions. If the board wants to establish some policy through its strategic planning around electric vehicles and use of electric vehicles, that would certainly be helpful, and I think that's something you may want to discuss. We're preparing a report for the board to assist with strategic planning around our climate change and our energy initiatives, and I think you would want to have a fairly robust discussion about that as a board, and it would certainly be helpful for staff. In the meantime, I think we're doing a reasonable job.
Follow up?
I'd like to follow up. I think what I was remembering was a Community Works Fund project that has been allocated to some sort of vehicle thing.
So in our Community Works, if I may, through the chair, in our Community Works gas tax proposals for our capacity building this year, one of the projects that was included in that list is an electrification strategy. So it is something that our asset management department, because the board did approve the funds, so it's something that they will be working on over the coming year. I don't know how long it will take to officially accomplish that, and so in the meantime, we still do have a need for some vehicles.
Director Smith.
Thank you. I would just like to bring out that there's currently 4 loans under this department, under the engineering services utilities for vehicles. And we have an opportunity to use capital reserve for a vehicle. I think that's a very good move for us to not have to be taking a loan out for a vehicle. And we do have the funds available. So I'd like to make a motion that budget function 576 engineering services utilities 2020 budget be amended to transfer from operating reserve 50,000 and increase vehicle expense by 50,000.
So actually, you do have this motion and it was tabled. So
That's on the table?
So it would need to be lifted from the table. So you've already, you made the motion, the board agreed to table it till we got to this part, and so now the motion is you want to bring it back on the table, and then we debate it.
Thank you very much, everyone. We'll eventually get this sorted out. So I'd like to bring the motion forward to be tabled at this time. Thank you.
Okay. So it's been moved and forward to bring the motion that was tabled earlier back. All in favor? Any opposed? That carries. Now, yeah, go ahead.
On the motion. So just the question, I guess, is have we factored in, given the cost savings of EVs and given the declining prices over the lifespan of a new vehicle, it doesn't make sense to replace the vehicle now, or would we be better waiting till we have a plan and we have the charging spaces and save money that way?
Matt, I think I can address that. This is a replacement vehicle. The existing vehicle has 280,000 kilometers on it, and its computer brain decides when it's damp outside that it has to stop and go into emergency mode. So it quite regularly does that, and the staff have to pull over to the side of the road and wait for it to decide it's okay again before we can continue on. So we really actually do. We get, so just, you know, so you can picture this, for our utilities are everywhere in the region, like from the very, very north to the very, very south and way out west. It takes hours and hours and hours for our staff to move around between them. They can't do anything unless they have a vehicle to get there. They can't. we might as well shut the door and go home, because we just have to be able to get there. And we use them right to the end, and then we trade them in. And we'd be keen to get to electric as soon as the types of vehicles are available, right? So there's very specialized equipment that we need. A lot of times it's very heavy equipment. We need to pull pumps, which sometimes weigh thousands of pounds and that kind of stuff. Or we need to take specialized tools with us, or all kinds of arrangements like that. We try and have light ones where possible, but we need a fair bit of very specialized ones. So we're keen to move that way, but it does take time, and we have to wait for the industry to provide for us what we need.
So for clarification, this is a tier 2, but you're saying that there's an opportunity for quite a few naps from staff in rainy weather.
The particular vehicle really needs to be
And since we don't
switched
have
out.
IA, it's probably
Yes.
some other problem.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Director Sebring.
Just for clarity, then, the motion that's before us is not for an electric vehicle, because we don't have an electric vehicle available for this kind of work. What are we buying here?
For the particular vehicle, I'd have to refer to my superintendent, who's not available. He's in a course today, but it would be a suitable vehicle. We have some hybrids that we use, and I think this would be a hybrid. In this case, we also really need to have that range too, and sometimes, they need to go from the very, very south to the very, very north in a day. So we need to have, the range is getting better and better, but we have to be really confident of that. Right, and then it can't be charged at night, and then there's an emergency or those kinds of things. So
Right.
it's a very specialized area, and we have this very unusual circumstance of all these many utilities spread out over this enormous
So a
area.
hybrid makes most sense at this time.
At this point, hybrids, yeah, we're satisfied with that. We do have some full electrics for our inside staff to use. We've got 2 now, and we actually share them within the other staff within the building can make use of those electrics and drive them to places. So we're doing those as best we can, and we'd like to do more as they become available.
Okay. Director Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've got this thing about buying brand new, which kind of irks me, as I mentioned before, because as soon as you drive it off the lot, it's cost you $10,000. And one of the things that I'm doing at the moment, and I'm looking at ex-lease things, and I've said to a couple of dealerships, look, I'm looking for something in 2 years' time, something that's going to be returned as an ex-lease. These things have been well looked after, and they've got next to no mileage on them, and you save a huge amount of money. Okay, you lose a little bit on the warranty, but that's not a big deal as far as I can make out. So have we looked at perhaps looking at an ex-lease model, which comes back in really very good condition? It has to, otherwise there's penalties.
Madam Chair,
Sorry. Mr. Crothers would like to respond to this.
Well,
Thank you, Mr. Dennison.
Thank you, Madam Chair, because I think on a bigger picture, we don't generally buy used vehicles. We don't by policy. I don't know that, unless it's a very specialized piece of equipment, like a fire truck that we bought from another department. From a procurement point of view, we buy new vehicles because of the warranty and because of the longevity. I'm going to suggest that this is a policy decision, and I think if the board wants to provide some direction with respect to staff on terms of policies around purchase of vehicles and whether we pursue new vehicles, I would be looking to our procurement officer for some expert advice on that particular matter. But we would, and we think we have bought, I think you just recently approved as a board a purchase of a fire apparatus from another fire department that was used. But for our primary vehicles that we use, our trucks, our cars, it has been our standard practice to buy new, and we've not had an inclination to buy used vehicles for a number of reasons.
Thank you, Mr. Crothers. Anyone else? Or are we ready? Oh, Director Stone, no? Call the question. Would you please read the motion? Ms. Legault.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It is to amend the 2020 budget for 576, the $50,000 transfer from operating reserve and $50,000 increase to vehicle expenditures.
All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Is there anything else in this section that anyone would like to bring up while we're on this page? I'm sorry.
Madam Chair, if I may, just for consideration of the committee, if the committee so wishes, for the vehicle replacement for Parks and Trails, which is primarily used by, for use by the park ranger and is out in the field on a daily basis. There is sufficient funds in operating reserves if the committee was so inclined to give consideration to that versus the requisition that is proposed.
So hearing that, does anyone feel inclined to move the purchase of the parks vehicle from, moved by Director Yanni DiNardo, seconded by Director Morrison? Would you like to speak to it, Director Salmon?
Maybe just the same question, with a little more info on the existing vehicle, how many miles and what's the story?
Madam Chair, through to Director Salmon, I don't have the mileage in front of me, but it is an older vehicle, 2008, and we're getting to that point in time where there are concerns with respect to ongoing repairs and downtime and impacts on staffing in terms of being able to get out in the field and do the work they need to do.
I imagine the undercarriage is a little, yeah, Director Carruthers,
Thank
CEO
you, Madam
Carruthers.
Chair, I appreciate all the conversations about vehicles, and this is not unusual. I've been a CAO for almost 20 years now, and every time vehicles come up around a board table or a council table, we spend a lot of time. I just want to assure the board that when our staff look at our needs for our vehicles, we recommend the most appropriate vehicle that we need. I don't believe we overbuild vehicles or get vehicles that we don't require. I know that staff spend a lot of time maintaining, we spend a lot of time repairing vehicles, and we get to a point where the cost of repairs and reliability gets to the point where it doesn't make economic sense to continue to invest in significant repairs or where there's a safety issue. So we don't just come to the board with a vehicle for the sake of needing a vehicle. We challenge the committee around, we have our own debate as a senior management team with these supplementals and ask very similar questions of our staff. And I can almost guarantee that when we come forward and the staff are looking for a vehicle, it's because we have had safety issues with them, because the repairs that are pending are far more than what would make sense, what we could even get the vehicle, get for it if we were to trade it in. So I just say that in general, that when these requests come forward, they have been well thought out by staff, and I think I would hope that the vehicles are appropriate for the use being contemplated.
Thank you, Mr. Carruthers. Director Smith?
Through the staff, Mr. Farquhar, can you tell me how many vehicles Parks has at the moment?
Madam Chair, there are 2 Parks vehicles here serving staff at Ingram Street amongst 6 staff, including our Parks Volunteer Coordinator, 2 Parks and Trails Planners, and our Capital Parks Specialist, myself, and our Parks Superintendent. Those 2 vehicles are shared by the staff we have here. Out of Bings Creek, our operations, where all staff there are involved in the field, we have a vehicle that supports each of the staff out there, which total 4.
Thank you. Can I call the question on this? All in favor? Opposed? Director Nicholson opposed. Motion carries. Director Acting.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to bring up function 121, Economic Development, Cowichan. I think we made a big error there by, if you look at if we don't have the original budget in front of us, but the original budget was actually decreased by 18% so that they could have that additional person. And so now they have only one employee, whereas before they had 2. So I have some of the numbers, so now they no longer have a special projects assistant. Well, I wanted to discuss it first, and it looks like Director Stone has a comment. Well, I just want to bring it to everyone's attention, and I would like to actually, at the very least, bring them to a 2.5% increase to what their function was last year. But I think we're really defunding this function, and then that actually hurts us in the long run because we have been investing in it, and it is proving to be quite useful. throughout the region.
Director Acton, it sounds like you're supportive of this position, so in the sake of time, I'd suggest you make a motion and test the board and see if you have, so you're moving that.
I would like to move that the Special Projects Assistant full-time position be approved by the board
The economic development
for
analysis.
121.
I think it's okay. I thought when she said 121, she was saying the amount, but you're right. Okay, is there a seconder? Okay, any debate on the issue? Director Stone?
So just for clarity, there was kind of, I don't know how to best explain how the situation was before, but Janae had worked with economic development, and I know that there was, I can't remember how that budget worked out, but essentially it was kind of like she was begged, borrowed, and stolen from, Ms. Mohan might be able to help with that situation, but the present situation was that we are actually reducing capacity of that department. You know, the challenge is, though, is that when that budget was reduced, it was to achieve the overall goal of the master budget of the board. So by reducing that budget, that allowed staff to bring forward a global budget that hit the metric. So keep in mind, if we re-add this position, of course, economic development's budget may be made whole again, but it has that impact on the global budget that the board, so they made that sacrifice and then brought it forward as a supplemental. So I'm not speaking against it, I'm just, so the board understands that, you know, this impact. And I believe this is a fully regional service that's funded by requisition or assessment. Thank you.
Director Wilson, Nicholson, and Yanni DiNardo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I can't support this one at all. I'm not a great supporter of the economic development because I was not impressed with what was done in the previous thing. I have sat down and spoke with Barry, and he's very enthusiastic, and I'm sure he's going to do a great job. But what I'd like to see is results first. Show me what you can achieve. I mean, one of the things that was brought to us not so long ago, which was initiated by the previous economic development officer, was the idea of a regional airport. And it just didn't make any economic or even logical sense at all. So what I'd like to see is, by all means, we have a new person in there. Perhaps we'll get some real progress made, and let's see what they can actually do in terms of bringing stuff in. Once I am convinced that they are providing a concrete service, a concrete contribution for the money that we're spending there, I will, by all means, I'll support his request for help. But until I see some results, I can't support this at all.
Maybe someone will speak to them, but we've had many reports about the results. But anyway, Director Stone, you're next.
So just a quick comment on the airport. That was actually a delegation that came to the board. The board gave the direction to pursue that, so you can't lay that on the feet of the economic development officer. That was actually direction from the board at that time. In terms of Mr. O'Riordan's work and the lack of results, I'd have to strongly beg to differ. It really depends on the level of engagement of the people that are directing the function. I know that ourselves in the Ladysmith Economic Development Strategy and working with Economic Development Couch, and we leveraged more dollars than the total salary from that department to our community just from their input into our economic development strategy, which then led to the app development, website development, and the funding partners that were able to be brought in through Ms. Melmock, Mr. O'Riordan's predecessor, actually exceeded the value of all the staffing that was actually dedicated to that function. And without going too far into it, there's another project that the funding, I believe, is coming soon that will blow away everything that we've done so far, and that again is a direct result of working with economic development and the granting and the partnerships we're able to bring together with airport, business organizations, all brought funding to the table, so that the combined investment of funds from Cowichan Valley Regional District and Town of Ladysmith was a small fraction of these overall project costs, and they were outside funders that were brought in directly as a result of the work of Economic Development Cowichan. To that end, I had actually had specific intention to talk to the South Area directors how they may be able to collaborate with their business groups and collaborate together to come forward with great leveraging opportunities and funding opportunities to put some economic development strategies together for the broader region. I kind of felt like the work that we were doing might create a bit of a pilot opportunity or a test case that you can refer to in combining some of the funding opportunities through other economic development organizations like ICE-T and others. That being said, I also met with Mr. O'Riordan, and after we had originally refused this request and indicated that this may be kind of unfortunately a step back here, but keep in mind that when you take away resources and then demand results, it's really hard to square that circle. I'm very cognizant of the savings that we were able to accomplish early in the day, essentially being absorbed by this position. So as I sit here right now, I still haven't made a decision on it. But keep in mind that the expectation of having a greater results while you're reducing resources for the department is pretty unlikely. What we would have to do is look to outside sources to help facilitate these projects through consultants. And I can tell you, consultant on the economic development strategy for Ladysmith in itself, I believe, was in the order of about $30,000. And if you bring a consultant into several projects, it's well going to exceed the value of this one staff position.
Thank you. Director Nicholson.
Thank you. When I started a term ago, I thought the economic development function was not effective at all. And then we had Ms. Melmock came online, and I think she took her time and she laid a good foundation and really got some good things happening. And recognizing that I personally don't think, but economic development is not a core function of the regional district. It's a nice to have, right? So it's one of those things where you can, if you invest in economic development, you can leverage grant money, you can facilitate collaboration and coordination in your region, which is really important. You can inspire things, and I think Ms. Melmock did a great job. So she's left, and when she left, I understand that there were a number of projects that exist that need to be continued and followed through on. And we have a new person who needs to find their way. And I think at this point it would be wise to slow down a little bit, give a year to sort of get Amy's work and make sure it gets followed through on, and that Mr. O'Riordan can figure out what he thinks are important new priorities moving forward, and we can have those discussions here before we invest further. That's my feeling, so I think it's premature this year. And if everyone is so concerned about saving money, I think it would be smart just to leave it the way it is and see how things go, and then revisit it next year.
Thank you. Director Yanni DiNardo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to thank Director Acton for bringing this forward again, and I echo some of the sentiments that we've already heard from Director Stone as well. I think that we have a really good person in that position. I worry about not having it resourced properly enough, and then they burn out, because Amy had Ms. Melmock had done amazing, and there was a lot of things on the go. And I see that we have a really energetic economic development manager that needs the support. I don't think you can get the things done and have the same results would not be happening. And then next year, he'd be burnt out and we wouldn't have that same. I just think that this is something that we need to support at the same level that we had before, because we were really going somewhere with this, which I hadn't seen in the past. Thank you.
Director Acton?
Thank you for allowing me to speak again. That's a good point, Director Yanni DiNardo, about burnout for sure, and just having that support and keeping the momentum going. So this function, maybe it's hard to see, but it does increase the livability of our communities, and so therefore it attracts more businesses, attracts the right businesses, attracts families, communities that can stay and work and live in. It's bringing different sectors that might not come to the island. Like we do suffer with kind of, we're missing the middle sectors where we have government and we have hospitality, but we're missing a lot of in between. So it brings that. And we've seen it firsthand in Shawnee and Lake, the support that economic development Cowichan has given them. Our village was empty 2 years ago, and they committed to coming and meeting with our businesses regularly. And same with Cobble Hill. They spent a lot of time in Cobble Hill, so we've seen the confidence. So businesses are opening up, and people are feeling confident investing in our communities. And I think it's a shame to leave it. And we should look at that, how much it actually is, because the original, do you have the number, the increase? Because when we look at things regionally and we're talking about $50,000 increase, it's not the same as one area.
So I think what she's asking is, this is a general government function, what would it be maybe on the average assessment to put it this position in? That's not what you're asking?
We've already approved. Sorry, we've already approved, I think it was 448. Where's the number?
Oh, for function
For
121?
function 121. And now we're talking, because they had, we actually approved a budget that's less than it was in 2019. So when we factor in the special projects assistant,
I remember that
we
from
lost,
from the report.
the reason why we lost that person was because it wasn't, they couldn't count on it. It was temporary. And we're losing more and more people. Actually, I just heard of somebody yesterday. So this is how we end up losing good people.
I have two more people, and then I'd like to call the question. Director Morrison. Ed Morrison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to thank
Now I'm gonna call the
directors
question.
bringing the facts to the table here, and that, you know, we've had plans and initiatives and the likes, and I'm kind of saddened in a sense that we as a group don't have a firm appreciation of how well regarded our economic development function is on the island. You know, I can tell you that there are outside agencies that look to what's going on in Couch and what Barry's predecessor had done and what he's doing with you know, pretty bright eyes and a lot of happiness around some of the things that we've done. And I just look at things like, you know, we've got a pretty robust and excited tourism sector. We've got a farming sector. We've got the ag show. We've got a whole bunch of stuff that's going on here. And I don't feel the need that it has to be proven to me that our ECDEV people have been doing a good job. And I also think too that if Mr. O'Riordan didn't think that this was a key position that he didn't need this year, he probably would have withdrawn it, given the climate that we're in. So, you know, let's support the things that we think are important and not say, prove to me your worth with less money. You know, I think that we have to step up. If we think this is important, then let's fund it. If we don't, like, I hadn't decided when I started talking whether I was gonna vote in favor of this or not, but let's do it on the basis of the facts that they've been doing a pretty good job for a few years now. And I think we've got a good person at the helm that could do more if we're prepared to fund this.
Director Sebring.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I sit along with a few other directors here on the ICE-T board, and I just want to echo what Director Morrison said about how highly regarded our function is when you listen to some of the mayors and directors and even staff from other parts of the island going, you guys at Cowichan are doing it right. On that basis, I'm excited about this. I have a bit of a process question, and forgive me if I don't understand the minutia, but when our previous economic development officer was here, I believe the current economic development officer was working under her, correct? I mean, it was kind of a natural internal succession promotion thing. Is that kind of how it worked?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. So we have had an analyst position in the Economic Development Department working with the manager for a couple of years now. So we've had 3 staff, an admin staff and our officer and our manager.
So
he was hired to replace
Ms.
Enns when she left, Janae Enns,
Okay.
as an analyst.
Yeah.
And then when Ms. Melmock left,
He
Barry
moved
was
up.
successful in the recruitment. So we actually have one last person in economic development.
So
as a result.
the position we're discussing here is his old position?
Yes, correct.
So we funded it before. Why the heck wouldn't we just keep, I don't understand why it's even here, in the sense of if the position was always there.
I have a list.
It's permanent now and it wasn't before?
It wasn't.
Okay, all right, that
Okay,
answers
you
my
wanna-
question. Thank you.
Look to the chair.
Go ahead, Mr. Carruthers.
I'll have staff, unfortunately, Ms. Cheroff isn't with us today, can speak to the details. We had a funding arrangement, as I think as Director Stone said earlier, we kind of begged, borrowed, and still stole money to make that position work within the existing budget. You know, in the 5 years that I've been here, I've seen the economic development budget go up and down, and so it's been a constant struggle to keep the sustainable funding in the economic development department. However, we were successful in maintaining that position up until the time that Ms. Melmock left. I know that Ms. Melmock was very concerned about filling that position and keeping that position funded long-term. What's happened over the last number of years is that she's been very aggressive in developing plans and strategies. We have a tech strategy, we have an industrial land use plan, we have a number of strategic initiatives. And in fact, every one of the candidates that we interviewed for the position when we were hiring the manager remarked at how nice it would be to come into an organization as an economic development manager to basically have all of those strategies in place and hit the ground running. I know that Mr. O'Riordan's concern would be around trying to achieve all of those plans with not having the additional support. So I would, as the CAO, would be concerned about expectations of the board. We do a good job in economic development, and I would want to temper the expectations that if we don't get that position, Mr. O'Riordan will do the best he can, but we will be limited in our ability because there's a lot of other things that economic development is involved in that I think often even I'm not aware of in terms of the community and interacting and working with other groups. And there's a lot on the plate for one manager and an admin support to tackle right now.
Thank you for the clarification.
So are we ready? People are calling the question. Oh, Ms. Mohan would like to say something.
Through the chair, there just seems to be a lot of speculation about how the position came to be. So I just wanted to provide some clarification. For the 2019 budget year and for the 2018 budget year, the third position in economic development was funded as a temporary position. 2 years running, it was funded as a temporary position for some of the same reasons you're discussing at the table today, that sometimes it's hard to make a commitment for an ongoing position. So it was never stable funding for an ongoing position. It was 2 successive one-year postings for that position. So that's why it's now considered not core, it's considered supplemental for that reason.
Thank you very much. We've had the question called. Do you have something new to add?
As a small area and looking at the budget, it's nice that Ladysmith has been able to take the benefit of this, because my community also benefits from things that happen in Ladysmith. So even though Saltaire has a lovely coffee shop you'll all have to come to, and Thetis Island has some businesses, I know the recognition of that we utilize a lot of the other areas that have had economic development, even though we participate in this and we have minimal going on in Area G. It is nice to have the other areas developing and have this access to this type of area that can work along, as we do need to be moving along. As people talk about climate change, all I continually hear is there's green jobs out there. So this is an area, if this is a direction we're needing to go, then we need to find those jobs and bring those jobs to our areas here.
I think that is the best close I've seen yet, so I'm going to call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? That motion carries. Thank you. Yes, the chair of the board says we need a 10-minute break, and I agree with him. But it's only going to be 10.
You just start, that's what I did last time.
Yeah. Okay, the first gavel was just sort of a dry run, but now we are calling the meeting back to order. And we'll turn it over to Ms. Soldera again.
All right, well, I'll direct your attention back to attachment B. We did discuss in a little bit more detail the corporate performance management software. Was there anything else anybody wanted to bring forward from that list?
Director Sebring.
121,
We're on attachment B.
attachment B, Rowing Canada promotional materials.
Oh, that's attachment D as in dog. I was on B as in Bob.
Oh, you were on Bob, okay, we'll go to D later. Sorry.
Okay,
Delta,
so,
thank you.
so we're moving to D?
We can, absolutely.
No, I mean, if people have stuff in B that they want to discuss,
We can go back and forth.
okay.
Keeps us awake.
All right, so Director Sebring has asked that we look at the Rowing Canada,
Yeah.
and so that's down in the Tier 3.
This was a supplemental request with no motion, and 121, under economic development, it's about 10 lines down on attachment D, economic development, Rowing Canada promotional materials, one-time operating for $25,000. I know it's Tier 3, but at this point, I think anything we can do to promote the fact that we are the destination for Rowing Canada. I know it's a few years out, but let's get a head start on that and start building that image for our community. That's part of, to me, what economic development is about, is creating awareness and getting the messaging out there. So I'd like to move that we insert $25,000 into the budget for Economic Development Function 21, Function 121 for Rowing Canada promotional materials, if I can get a second there.
Okay, any debate? Did you have anyone have their hand up on this side that I just missed? No? Anyone have anything they want to say about it? Director Acton.
So this is a Tier 3 request, and you feel like it's more important than like a Tier 2 that we have denied, or maybe even a Tier 1 that we've denied. I have not seen a business case for Rowing Canada, or how they are actually going to help promote our area or add any value at this time. I'm sorry, I can't support this motion.
Director Stone.
I just have a question. Usually in the economic development budget each year, we have some budgeted funds for, and I appreciate that Mr. O'Riordan has just left, but typically we have some of that budget allocated to funding projects, and I'm just wondering if there is any allocations within the ECDEB budget for project funding, that this would be appropriately put within the existing envelope for project funding.
You have to look for it?
I was going to say, my recollection of that budget is that the project-specific funding had projects assigned to it already, so they didn't have any unallocated project funding in their 2020 budget. And Mr. Farquhar is nodding at me that that is the case.
Director Smith.
Okay, thank you.
Looking here at that budget, it's got agriculture, film, sports, tourism. So I would assume under sports tourism that materials would fall someplace in that area. Is that right?
I will defer to Mr. Elzinga, who is responsible for sport tourism.
Thank you through to the director that in the existing section of sport tourism, there is no project identified for Rowing Canada. I will speak a little bit to the discussion that this initiative has been led by North Cowichan since its inception, and the regional district has been a supporter of the initiative. We've been involved in some of the meetings, some of the discussions with Rowing Canada since day one. This supplemental is to recognize the impacts of what Rowing Canada could do for the region. If this supplemental is not approved, the initiative will stay with North Cowichan and not have any regional impact.
So I'd like to speak to it. This is a general government function, right? We would all pay, or is this just electoral areas?
This is everyone.
Everyone. So I heard when we were talking about the ECDev position, how economic development in one part of our region benefits all of the region. And Mr. Elzinga is correct. North Cowichan has been working with Rowing Canada for several years. It's actually quite a coup that they've decided to come here. They've been wooed by a lot of different areas and who are quite disappointed that they didn't get them to come here. And I think the spin-off for the investment for each of your areas, when you break out the $25,000 between population, would be well worth it. And you know, these athletes are going to be living here, their families are going to be coming to visit, they're going to be practicing here, people are going to want to come and watch. And I just think it is a really positive thing, along with some of the bike races and everything that we've attracted. And so I will support the motion. Director Morrison and then Director Sebring. And Director Smith.
So I get the importance of this, and I can also understand why it's been rated Tier 3. I would really like for the regional district to participate in this. I think that it does have regional implications, and I don't think I'm comfortable going to requisition for this full amount of 25, and I'm just wondering, and I guess I'm putting this through to perhaps Mr. Elzinga and Ms. Soldera, looking at our operating reserve sheet for this is 121. It looks like we have a balance of just about 107,000, and our minimum expenses is 97,000. Would 10 grand do anything towards participating and helping with this initiative if this resolution under requisition failed?
Through the chair to the director, and I think I'm not sure if I'm the correct person to speak on this, but that's certainly an option for the committee to take 10,000 from reserve.
So I have Director Sebring, Smith, Stone, and Acton.
I'm not sensing support to do this with requisition, so I'd like to amend my motion to take 10,000, to make it 10,000 and to take that from the operating reserve.
Do you have a seconder? Seconded on the amendment? All in favor? Opposed? Carries. Oh, right. The original motion is amended. All in favor? Oh, yeah, you can speak. I have a list. I am sorry. Director Smith is next.
So when we look at the list here of all the Tier 2s that we've passed on and some of the Tier 1s that we've passed on, when we move into Tier 3, this is not an essential item, and I can't support any funding at this time. Economic development is great, but I'm not really sure that this is the area that we should be headed with our economic development and how much staff time would be involved in this. We've just added a position, and then how much of that person's time is going to be spent on these materials and some of the other, so that even if it's 10,000, it still comes with a staff time cost, and I can't support that at this time. We need to move along as we are with economic development.
May I just ask staff if indeed this ask, I don't believe it's asking for staff time. I think it's asking for contributing to materials that would be developed somewhere else, but I could be wrong.
through the chair, or to the chair. So I think it would have minimal staff time. There would be a staff time component. Both Mr. O'Riordan and myself have been attending meetings, but the primary purpose for this supplemental item is for signage and promotional materials, perhaps a little bit of coordination with athletes.
Thank you for the clarification. Could we have Director Stone now?
Thank you. So I'm going to muddy the waters a little bit more. No, I'm just trying to make this whole. I think it's a worthy, but as it is through the budget it's in, I'm not sure I can support it. So there's usually other avenues of funding these kinds of things. And to me, we've had sports tourism grants. I believe that budget is spent. Yeah. Yeah. But the funding is allocated to that grant program for 2020. So that's a budget item for 2020, is it not?
Correct. There is if I may, Madam Chair, there is a budget item for those sport grants. I believe the line item, with not having it in front of me, was $30,000 for sport grants in 2020. So that is not allocated at this point as part of the budget.
Okay, and then there's also, we've had in the past special projects funding that used to be an offshoot of grants, regional grants and aid. Do we still have that function and funding?
The regional grant and aid budget was reduced to zero.
Including the special projects funding?
The board has a strategic initiatives fund
Yes.
of $75,000 in the Function 100 budget.
Okay, thank you. And that's, right now, is that retained? Has any of that been spent for 2020?
Not at this time.
Thank you. I would contend that this would be more of a strategic investment, but
So are you wanting to, how do we deal with that? Because we have an amended motion on the floor. So I have Director Acton and Director Nicholson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This does not feel like good decision-making. This kind of just got thrown out there. We haven't looked at other things versus this. And where does this put us in the future? Are we committing to some kind of regional planning with Rowing Canada? Like, this needs to be looked at with the whole picture and not just a little bit of a, you know, this is how you end up down the route of owning an airport. You suddenly start investing in it, and we did not, as a region, say, yes, we want to invest in Rowing Canada. So I think we need to look at everything. And are we adding work to Barry's plate when we just heard from people
No,
he
I think
just
we
started?
just heard from, we've had that question answered, and it's no.
Well, we put it
Minimal.
in his basket, and so it's a tier 3 item. Anyway, okay, I can't support this though, and I don't feel like we've been given fair shake of giving this some thought.
So the question has been called, but I do have Director Nicholson, and then I'd like Director Sebring to close, and we'll call the question.
So I am, this is, my memory's failing me today. I vaguely remember that the Sportsplex asked for $75,000 for their field building. And my understanding that the field building is somehow important to Rowing Canada, is that correct or not?
No. If I may, Madam Chair, the field house was designed to perhaps expand.
Can we pay attention, please, directors? Carry on,
The
Director
field house
Sebring.
is being designed to perhaps expand to include the Rowing Canada Dryland Training Facility, but that half would be entirely at Rowing Canada's expense. We're not funding anything for Rowing Canada there. That's not part of this.
But they'd have to have the field building.
No,
in
they
order
don't.
to
They
expand,
could,
add on to it?
they could build their own. In fact, they haven't decided whether they want to add on to the field house or whether they want to build a standalone. It's just an option to say, you know what, maybe there's some economies of scale if you add on to the field house, or maybe you're going to build it over in another corner of the Sportsplex property.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, Director Sebring, do you have anything else?
Yeah,
to close?
just to close, you know, to the concern that we're going down a rabbit hole here where we're committing to a whole bunch of ongoing things. It just very clearly says under type it's a one-time grant. You know, part of this from kind of North Cowichan's perspective and from the region's perspective, the Tokyo Olympics are coming up. That'll be the last Olympics before Rowing Canada officially moves here. It's my understanding that, you know, we being North Cowichan are looking at some promotion at those Olympic Games in Tokyo for who we are, for where Rowing Canada is going to, and it'd be nice to give the Rowing Canada people a suitcase full of pins and say, here, hand those out in Tokyo. And maybe the mayor will go along and do it for them. I don't know, but I mean, those are the.
Oh, the truth comes out.
No.
Way to get a no vote. That one's got to go down in the books.
Probably. No, but just, that's sort of what I envision this being spent on, is part of it is promotion at the Olympics coming up in Tokyo, and we need a little lead time. That's why this one flagged for me, and I went, oh, wait a minute, we got to look at it. And if we can't get 25 grand, I think for 10 grand, we can probably still do some good work. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, so could you read the motion, because some of us are aging as we sit here.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Tier 3 supplemental request for Rowing Canada promotional materials totaling $10,000 funded from operating reserves be approved.
All in favor? Opposed? Yeah, that probably sealed it. Oh, that carried. But you're still not going to Tokyo. Okay, anyone else have any, oh, you go ahead and ask the question.
Are there any other items on the attachment D list, the ones with no motion, or anything that anyone would like to reconsider on the attachment B list? The ones that were defeated. So I'm going to leave it up there for a second as people look.
It's looking like maybe they're pretty satisfied.
Oh.
Director Stone, you going to make me
No,
wrong?
I was just going to recommend that, I'd heard during the last debate that we still have these ones in the R5, which is, I believe, the parking lot.
R5 is next, yeah.
You ready to
And
move?
these are, I think, more critical ones. Anyway.
I think that's a fair call. Nobody seems to be jumping up and down.
Okay, so
Can you
we-
take us to R5, please?
Absolutely. So R5 is the items that were, the parking lot items, so the items that were deferred, and there are specific motions included with your agenda.
Yes. I'm sorry, Director Nicholson, I was busy reading them.
I'd like to move one.
Which is the ortho, GIS ortho. Is there a seconder? I'll second it to hear what you have to say.
I think this is a very important, we're in the dark ages in our GIS department as far as our ability to produce good maps. And I think that this is an important investment. And I think it's necessary for good land use planning. And if you recall, I don't know if you went to any of those affordable housing open houses that we had when we were talking about that new service, the potential new service. When it got to the pictures of the areas in the electoral areas, it was embarrassingly poor compared to what was available elsewhere. And I really think that we need to invest in this and get on with it. And I know it seems like a large chunk of money, but it's a one-time thing here. It's not like hiring someone. So I would really encourage you to think about investing, making this investment.
I was going to say, so just to clarify, looking at the supplemental request from the IT manager, this is ongoing. It is $100,000 each year for the next 3 years, and then we would fly the regional district at that time, and she's anticipating $50,000 following that. One thing to note, and just to bring to the board's attention, is GIS is funded as an allocation budget. 80% of the costs of GIS are funded by Function 250, which is Electoral Area Services, and 20% of the costs are funded by Function 100, General Government. Currently, in the Function 250 budget, there is actually more operating reserves than the maximum amount. So one option, maybe at least for some of the costs of this project. So the supplemental request was put forward to fly the ortho photos in 2022 for a total of $300,000. So it was asked for a $100,000 contribution this year to go towards that reserve. And so 80% of that cost would come from Function 250. So it might be worth looking at bringing forward, at least attributing some of the reserve that's currently in Function 250 for the future. Function 250's operating reserve primarily would go to pay for the election every 4 years, and the election last time was approximately $150,000. There's currently over $300,000 in that account.
That's good information. Did everyone get that? So what's your pleasure? Director Stone?
Yeah, so just to be clear, this is $100,000 a year for 3 years. The project would actually be completed in 2022 with the transfer from this reserve that we'd be creating to fund it as it shows in the schedule. And then I assume $50,000 a year after that is integration and so on and so forth. Neither of us are GIS techs. So yeah, it's just clarity. Even if we took a reserve portion of that to 80%, so we're talking about $240,000 through Function 250 over the next 3 years. Even if we take an operating reserve to fund it for 2020, there's still going to be that $160,000 over 2021, 2022 that would be charged to EASC or electoral areas Function 250. Is there any, and then additionally, they'd be an equal partner in the Function 100 budget. So although the electoral areas would get allocations through 250, they'd also be paying that share of the Function 100 budget as well. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kieber.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I just want to also clarify the work that we're talking about here. What the GIS department has done is they've gone in with the other local governments, basically of the lower island, and with the plan of doing, so there's economies of scale to be achieved here if we do it all at once. So that's the plan to do it in 2022, I believe, or 2023. And the also idea is that we'd have consistent data for the municipalities as well as electoral areas. So right now, I think Director Nicholson was correct. We're adequately underfunding electoral areas for the flying, and this would bring us up to the same par as the other municipalities in our area in the south.
Thank you. Director Stone, you have
Just a follow-up based on what I just heard from Mr. Kieber. Is the municipal portion funded through the regional district, or is there an expectation the municipalities will be funding their portion through the municipal budgets?
The member municipalities fund their GIS through their own budgets.
Okay, so then essentially for the municipalities, we would be paying through our municipal budgets and then our share of Function 100.
Which is why there's 80% of it charged to the GIS area.
Yeah, thank you.
Anyone else have anything to say about the matter? Director Nicholson.
I'd just like to add that it's getting increasingly difficult to do land use planning, and I suspect as we move into modernization, we are really going to need this improved resolution around things like wetlands and stream locations and so forth. So I think it's really short-sighted of us not to get going on having a good information base on which to make decisions.
Director Acton.
Yes, thank you, Director Nicholson, for bringing this up. I think this is a really important tool that we need to invest in, and we talk about at this table that our core services is one of them is downstairs, so we really need to support them. So I'm looking forward to calling the question when that happens.
So do you need to clarify that we want to do this out of the reserve? Because that wasn't part of the motion. So someone needs to, if that's the intention, someone needs to move an amendment. Is that what you're doing?
Yep, if I can just get clarity from Ms. Soldera, how much from this year do we have a significant or sufficient funds in the reserves to fund the 100,000 from reserves this year? Or because now we're talking about 80%, so the 80,000, 250 budget share, is there sufficient money in the reserves for function 250 to do that?
There absolutely is.
So the 20% remaining, is there?
We could also fund from function 100 operating reserve.
I would make that motion.
That amendment.
Sorry, that
Second to-
amendment.
Seconded by Director Staples. Can I call the question on the amendment? All in favor? Any opposed? On the main motion? Certainly. Can you read the motion, please?
So it's to approve the Tier 2 supplemental request for GIS ortho photos for $100,000 funded 80% from operating reserves and 20% from function 100 operating reserves.
Ready for the question? All in favor? Opposed? That carries. Nice work, Director Nicholson. Okay. Carry on.
So the next two go hand in hand. They are together. They are a full-time position for commuter transit and transit to be split 33% for commuter transit and 67% for transit. And I believe that Mr. Wakeham made a presentation on this the other day.
So which attachment are we looking at then? 'Cause
So,
my next one,
so the specific supplemental items are attached to R4, R5, I apologize.
right, so
there
the
are
one I have after GIS is Bings Creek Skidster replacement.
Sorry,
So I'm not
I
sure
don't have
where
them in the
you
right
are.
order. I'm looking at just
The
my deferred
resolutions in the
list, so I
agenda order
apologize.
are different than the function order, that's all.
Okay, sorry,
Sorry.
I'm looking at my Surface, so
Yeah, I
can.
had the wrong piece of paper in front of me. So the next one, you're absolutely right, is the Tier 2 supplemental request for skid steer replacement from Function 520 Solid Waste Management for $100,000. And we do have someone from Solid Waste here, if anyone would like to have more information on it.
Do you need your memories refreshed on this, Director Stone?
Bringing it up here, I can't quite see the final column, but it shows for the skid steer replacement, looks like 21,000 from requisition, and I'm presuming there's a reserve in there?
So this one is actually being proposed to be funded from
5-year,
debt.
right. Okay. And since the appropriate people are here, the refresher on the memory was the skid steer is end of life. We need another one. Mr. Adair?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, that's correct. The skid steer is 2003. It's reached the end of its life. We've had 7 different incidents this year of repairs where we've lost the machine, and that has attracted back to the operation, and that trend will just continue due to the age and the age of the machine.
And I imagine each year we wait, the purchase price of the new one's going to go up.
That's right. That's part of the factor, and then also the downtime of the operation.
Right.
Like I said, it's been down 7 times this year, so it's starting to have an impact on the operation.
Seems like a critical piece of equipment to me.
Absolutely. It's for the Mead Creek facility, so we use it every day. It's been able to last this long because of the operating hours of the facility. Mead Creek operates 3 days a week in the winter, 4 in the summer, so we were able to get a prolonged life out of it, but it's definitely at the end of its life now. And it's used to load material and thousands of tons of material per year, so it's an essential piece of equipment.
Director Sebring.
I'm just wondering if I'm on the wrong page here, because the staff report says replacement for Bings Creek Bobcat skid steer, and you're telling me it's, I'm just looking at the spreadsheet.
It does say Bings Creek.
That should say Mead Creek. It's the skid steer located at the Mead Creek facility.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was in the original report that was presented to us. Yeah, for sure. It's hard to remember it all. So can I ask a question, since everyone's really quiet? I don't even know what this kind of machinery looks like, but is the public anywhere near it? Is there any danger of it harming anyone from staff or the public if something breaks on it?
Not particularly in that aspect, but essentially you can think of it as a forklift in a warehouse. So where you're moving around pallets, you're loading cube vans, you're loading, you're shipping, using to ship and receive. So if we're not able to do that, then
We're stockpiling.
we're stockpiling it, which has happened several times this year due to the downtime. So the site will not work without a skid steer. We could continue to use this one, but we're up to $17,000 in repair bills this year, and that's just going to continue to rise.
Well, that's kind of a no-brainer. I think Director Acton might be making a motion. Is that right?
No, I just have a question for staff. I guess since we're trying to cut taxes where we can, I believe this is somewhere like a $7 million function. Is that correct?
Function 520,
Yes.
it's in excess of that.
Yeah, so it's more than $7 million. I would perhaps, out of that extra 2.5%, you could find $100,000 to buy it within the budget?
I think they would have done that if they could. We've heard how lean and how much the staff
That was my
debated.
question.
Function 520, all of the operating dollars are allocated for. I believe last year it had a very small surplus. So to find operating funds to purchase equipment is going to be difficult in 520.
Director Stone.
Thank you for, the question I was going to ask would have been, I think, I didn't hear it brought up before, the $17,000 in repairs, and then if you add downtime and inefficiencies, it could be easily argued that we've actually spent more in 2019 than the cost of borrowing to replace the skid steer, so I would move that it's Meads Creek though, not Bings Creek, right?
That's correct.
That the Tier 2 supplemental request for a Meads Creek skid steer replacement for a total of $100,000 be approved.
Seconded by Director Staples. Are you ready for the question? Yes, certainly.
So a brand-new piece of equipment would go to Mead, but it's not open all the time. Is there another piece of equipment that, because I know how busy Bing is, so would it be better to put the brand-new piece at Bing and move something over to Mead?
I think that's kind of operations. That would be up to Mr. Carruthers and his staff. It's a great creative idea, but I'm sure if that would be
It
better,
was
they
just
would
a
do that.
question. I'm sorry I interrupted.
So, anyone else have anything to say, or can we call the question? Okay, all in favor? Opposed? That carries. I think that was a good decision. Thank you very much. Carry
All
on.
right. So, next is function 532. So, in function 532, that's the drinking water and watershed protection function. Put forward was a senior environmental analyst position. What is that one?
So this comes out of that function.
Function
And the
532.
purpose of this is to help us decide how to allocate the money in that function. Correct? Or would you like to say something more about it, Mr. Carruthers?
Yeah, Madam Chair, so this would be a technical staff person that would begin to start undertaking the work of the Drinking Water and Watershed Protection Service. We held off in the first year pending the completion of our strategic plan, but at some point in time, with the work that we're going to be undertaking, we're going to need staff resources in order to do that. So staff had put this forward. I can update the board as well that we will be coming forward through the Community and Technical Advisory Committee, I believe, with recommendations sometime in the first quarter, January, February, around strategic direction for this service. But in the meantime, staff have put this request forward so that we have some capacity to undertake that work.
Director Stone.
I've got so many tabs open here, I can't find it, but there was a requisition last year when we established the service. Was there expenditures out of there? Is there, the challenge is we did a requisition for this last year, but I understood that it was kind of, a step of requisition. what was the, I'm just having challenge that we're again going to increase the requisition for the function, and yet we still haven't seen anything. And I'm a huge supporter of the function and the work, but I'm wondering if, based on the fact that we're a year after we established the service and first did requisition for it, if we're moving fast enough to a place where budgeting for that position this year, do we need to budget for the full position, I guess is my point, because by the time we get strategic direction, then we look to hire the person. Are we looking mid-year before we even have an employee in place? And therefore, could we try and step up rather than going for the full requisition?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think the two would happen parallel. I think regardless of the direction that you're going to get or the recommendations you're going to receive from the Technical and Community Advisory Committee, there is a lot of work that's going to need to be done. So we were kind of doing the two in parallel. That's a fair statement. I would expect that if the budget had been approved, we would be starting the recruitment process for this position early in the new year to have them, I would assume, in place by sometime in the second quarter of 2020. But if the board was so inclined to be wanting to wait for that direction from the committee, then you're quite right. We would probably be 4 or 5 months into the year before we were actually recruiting somebody and had someone on the ground. So that is an option to consider.
Director Stone, follow-up?
Thank you. Follow-up is, I'm trying to see what Ms. Holder has brought up there, which I think is 2019, we allocated $500,000. We spent 102, or is that what's left over?
The 102 is the surplus, is the amount that it costs to do the referendum, which is required to
Right.
be put forward as a.
So, and
as
then
a surplus.
397.
So I cannot tell you what we've actually spent so far. We don't have the actual expenditures for 2019 on there.
Okay,
They
just
have
because I've
put
got the,
forward just a 2.5% increase for 2020. And are suggesting, so the maximum requisition for this function was $750,000. They're still requisitioning significantly below that. However, adding this position would add the extra 100 and.
yeah, and I guess I was just trying to see a way to, again, smooth out that impact by funding it for half a year or a portion of the year and looking at unallocated or unspent funds from 2019 to sort of soften the blow over a 2 or 3 year period. But as we don't know what the actual reserve balance will be at the end of the year, it's really difficult to bring any kind of a motion forward.
Director Sebring and then Nicholson.
I'm a rookie here, so forgive me for asking the rookie question. We created the function and we're taxing for it. We can't pay for the staff to operate the function out of that.
Yep.
Okay.
We just didn't go to the maximum requisition yet, so this is adding.
Well,
Haven't gone to the
I thought we went to max requisition last year.
No.
Okay, sorry.
No.
All right.
Director Nicholson.
I just was wondering what kind of a technical person we're looking for.
Mr. Hatimi.
Yeah, thank you. We are looking for somebody with experience as an environmental planner who can actually help us to implement the work plan and all of the tasks and projects and functions that is related to that work plan. So somebody with a background in environment.
Follow-up?
Yeah, so I think it's really important for the CVRD to acquire some solid technical expertise in hydrology or hydrogeology. I think moving forward with this, more general management would be nice to have, but I think the ability to do some solid analysis and really understand technical reports that consultants do and be able to review them is really important.
Did you want to say something about that, Mr. Peters?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I won't speak for Mr. Atami, but I think he was saying in general terms, I would be expecting that those would be the disciplines that we would be looking for in hydrology and that area. Mr. Atami.
Well, normally somebody who studies environmental and in general planning or science, they have this knowledge. Not necessarily they are very specialized in hydrology and hydraulics, that we don't need that. Otherwise, the individual would be boring, would get bored and then we cannot actually continue with that because we are developing a 10-year work plan. So 10-year work plan actually clearly identifies what has to be implemented. And somebody with the general knowledge helps. And if it goes to further detail that is required, as a hydrologist and as a water resources specialist, I'm there to help. So we don't need that level of detail of expertise.
Okay, I think I had Director Smith, and then we'll go to Director Acton and Morrison. Oh, did I have you? Director Morrison, I missed you, then Smith and Acton. Sorry.
So, thank you, Madam Chair. I think part of the rationale in a less than full requisition last year was that there needed to be the work of the group that's putting together the work plan. And I think that it was also recognized, or at least I recognized the fact that that we were going to need that somewhat specialized personnel to manage this, because our staff couldn't continue to do this off the corner of a desk. So I like the way Director Stone was going in that that perhaps there might be some surplus at the end of the year. There might be some appetite amongst the committee to perhaps meet 50% of this through requisition and perhaps fund this after we've had the recommendations from the task group that's putting together the work plan. So I think that we don't have to go the full route and fund the full year's cost for this, but a portion of it, and I'd be willing to support something like that if someone was to put it forward. Someone in a brown jacket over there.
With a little bow on it. Director Smith.
So a year ago, the community voted on this referendum to create this function, and we debated on this function last year at budget time. One of the things that I noticed in the budget from last year, for 2019, there's approximately 280,000 that's showing consultant and wages. Now, whether that's been used or not, that's a lot of money that's already in the budget for a position. So if a lot of these consultant positions could be used as an employee, then we wouldn't require all these consultants and we wouldn't need to increase the requisition. So I'm not really sure. I see for 2020 I see 70,000, another 20 for benefits. I see a consultant for 20, another, the grant and aid is 60,000. We've got more consultants down here of 20,000, more consultants for 20,000. So we're adding all these consultant fees up and another 25,000 down here. So is this position, these consultants all put together and we really don't need the consultants? Can Mr. Hatami explain, do we need all these consultants that are listed for expenses during 2020, and maybe that could be someone's position?
Well, for 2019, Madam Chair, sorry. For 2019, we had to hire a consultant, not only for the technical side of it to help us to develop the work plan, but also to facilitate. The reason for that is, we invited other stakeholders, all of the NGOs and ENGOs, to participate and provide us with the feedback and also their work plan that could be integrated into our 10-year work plan. So when we actually have this final plan, we don't need that consultant. We will be at the implementation mode. And again, there were 4 major areas that were identified as 4, I call it major functions. One was actually the watershed management plan completion, which we started over 3 years ago, and we are at maybe phase 3, but we continue with that with the help of the community at ENGOs and NGOs, that they bring, a kind of great experience and knowledge to help, with this function. So part of, this kind of fund, we pay for that in exchange, for their help to this plan, we pay them.
Yes, Mr. Crothers.
If I can just provide some further clarity, the salary dollars that you see there are accounting for Ms. Miller and Mr. Atami's time in overseeing that division or that function under environmental service or engineering services. Those consultants would be on top of the staff. Those are specialized consulting services in terms of water quality monitoring, those kinds of things. That would be in addition to the staff that's being requested through the supplemental. I don't believe that it was intended that we would convert those consultant dollars into staff dollars. They're specialized consulting services to be able to achieve some of the projects that would be anticipated coming forward in the future.
Director Acton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will be supporting either the portion of this new position or the full position. I have had the opportunity to talk with Ms. Miller, and I feel like I have a good understanding of the function. It's too bad that we haven't had a report, so it's hard to make these kind of decisions. But, and I don't think the position is going to be highly technical from what you're talking about, Director Nicholson. But I think we have to continue to support it, so I will be supporting whatever the committee's will is.
Thank you. Director Stone.
Sorry, and I know that we cover so much ground over a year, but I go back to the first two times I believe Ms. Miller presented the progress, and one was around budget time, and then one was kind of an interim update around this, the establishment of this function. And it was understood at that time that these consultants and stuff would bring expertise in different areas to the building of a highly technical function. And then once we receive these reports, I hear now early in the new year, that then those dollars would be used to actually carry out the work that would be prescribed in that work plan. And again, the understanding last year was trying to again talk about, easing into some of these expenses, was to establish the plan and then sort of bump up the budget as we get to work in 2020. So I honestly believe this is actually honoring the intent of the referendum, but I am, it's unfortunate because I'm feeling that the good work that we did this morning in trying to lower the burden, we're just actually probably exceeding now with the decisions we made this afternoon. However, this is an important item, and I feel that I'm compelled to support it.
Director Smith and then Sebring.
Thank you very much. I read the description. It says a full-time senior environmental analyst to support the new drinking water and watershed function. This supplemental is required as per policy to request a new staff position for this program. The staff person would assist with the delivery of technical program components of the function as it moves forward in the implementation of the drinking water watershed protection work plan across the region. A second staff position is anticipated at a later date to support the education and outreach components in time. So we're just starting employing staff, and we're going to be adding more staff to this in a little while. Is this person anticipated in the next year, or can someone speak to that?
Mr. Hatimi?
Thank you, through you. We are going to actually try that for the first year and see what is the workload. And the way it goes, not necessarily we need a second FTE, but you never know, because we are at the point that, let's say we want to collect, some samples and do some water quality. If NGOs and ENGOs have the capacity to help us, then you have the answer. I don't need an extra staff.
Right.
But if they don't, at that point, we decide.
So I'm going to go to Director Sebring, and then Director Stone. I'm going to go to Director Salmon. He hasn't spoken yet on this, so Director Sebring.
I'm happy to defer to somebody who hasn't already spoken.
Director Salmon.
Thank you. So just to clarify, so this 128,000 is in addition to the existing 500,000? So it's brand new. So can we point to what we got out of the 500?
So that's what he's asking.
Because, like in 2019, this year, we had about $500,000, and we paid for the referendum, and then we hired a consultant. We are paying for that, and part of it also covers, 10% of my kind of involvement and salary, and Ms. Miller's actually salary, not 100% because my time has been allocated, But again, for 2020, we are looking at that. We are building the budget for that. So we need actually one FTE. One FTE translates into 120, was that 126,000? 28? Yeah.
126.
126. So that's that. I mean, you may consider it an addition, but that's part of the thing.
It seems to me if it costs $100,000 at the referendum, that leaves you with $400,000, that's not enough for one FTE? What, already?
$400,000, but again, in that work plan, we anticipate basically to help, to implement the work plan. We are, as I said, collecting, data, analyzing data. Who is going to help us? Are we going to hire, a consultant? Are we going to hire NGOs? If they are going to work for us, we have to pay for that. So that's what we are working on, that work plan, to allocate, the budget and how much do we need to run that program. But we're going to come back sometimes in January to present, the work plan to you.
Thank you. Did you want to get in, I was going to call you Dr. Sebring.
I just want to come back to the consultants piece. When I add up all the lines that say consultants and contracts for services, which is essentially to me the same thing, I come up with $125,000 in this budget. And I'm told that the reason we hired the consultants last year was to put the bones to this plan and figure out what we're going to do with the money that the folks have authorized us to tax them for in this function. Part of my question is how long do we continue paying these consultants $125,000 a year, and do we need the staff member now before those consultants give us the recommendation on what it is that this function is going to do? This seems to me, and I'm somewhat sympathetic to Director Stone's idea of phasing it in, because perhaps halfway through it'll make more sense. But to me, until we've done the groundwork on setting the skeleton of this thing and figuring out what we're going to do, let's not hire any staff to do it until we know what we're doing. That's just my
Mr. Carruthers?
perspective.
I'll take a stab at it, Madam Chair. Thank you. I mean, when we were envisioning this service right from the beginning, we always envisioned that we would lead at least one and possibly two staff members to undertake the work. It's a lot of complex work, yeah. There is also a contingent of consulting that goes with some of this very technical work that we would be specialists in to deal with some of our monitoring, some of our climatic work. So Ms. Miller has included in her budget some provisions for bringing in consultants and contract services to support some of those functions. We are in a bit of a development stage right now in terms of what that's actually going to look like on the ground. We cannot continue to deliver this service by just having Mr. Atami and Ms. Miller. They have got a full slate of work, so we need one position to be able to be furthering the work that's coming forward. I think Mr. Atami is correct that in time we will look and see as this work plan unfolds what our capacity is and what kind of additional resources we may need. There may be some opportunities to partner with some of the NGOs to do some of this work, but I believe that Ms. Miller has accounted for some consulting services that she believes in these technical sections of this service that we would be requiring potentially to undertake the work, over and above the work that our staff would be doing.
Not to argue with the CAO, because that's never a good idea.
But.
It's one thing to say we need technical expertise and advice in the performance of this function. It's quite something else to say we need technical and consultant advice in laying out how we're going to do this function. That was what I heard And that's what I'm not hearing from you.
Sorry, Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
For clarity, yes. So we hired a consultant to come in and facilitate this work. We've had 2 consultants that are doing that work with the Community and Technical Advisory Committee. They will be wrapping up. That work will be done. We'll deliver the report to the board, and then that phase of the project will be complete.
Forgive me, Mr. CAO, but when I look down these budget columns, I don't see any reduction in any of the lines that say consultant. If it's 20,000 last year, it's 20,000 this year.
I think you just heard that Ms. Miller has had a contingency for what special consultants might be required going forward.
But
I'm feeling a bit like we've really beat this up for quite a little while. We went to the public.
Madam Chair, my question has not been answered.
Okay, what is your question?
My question is, if, as the CAO tells us, that work is wrapping up, how come some of those line items for consultants, because there's about 7 or 8 of them in here, none of them that I can see are being reduced? Is that, as the chair indicates, a case of, well, now we're shifting money to different consultants but leaving it on the same line, or maybe I'm misreading it? That's possible too.
Yeah, and through the chair, without having Ms. Miller here, Ms. Miller has been instrumental in putting this budget together, so I would be remiss if I was trying to go into detail in terms of the details around those consulting lines. I'm providing you with my understanding of what's been put forward.
So I would like to ask for someone to move some kind of a motion on this, and what I'd like to say to set it up is that we went to the people, we chose to set up this service. I think they would want us to get something done instead of having the money sitting there. So is anyone prepared to move a motion? You are. Do you have something new to add? Okay. Go ahead. Director Stone is after Director Acton, who is after you.
So what I hear the CAO saying is that the technical, the consultant, and the other groups that have been brought together under this umbrella of this service are wrapping up. And I feel that as directors, I would feel more comfortable waiting until we see what comes out of that from the consultants and from the technical groups that have been put together, and then we would be able to make a further decision at that time. I would feel better if we put this staff on hold at this time and that we had a look at the report. Until we have a report, we're just making a stab in the dark at this point. So I would recommend that we do not. So I'd like to make a motion that we pass, or that we do not move forward at this time, but look at it in the spring. We can still amend our budgets until March, I believe, and that would be an opportunity for us to revisit it after we've seen the actual report that we've spent almost $400,000 to put together this year.
Mr. Hatimi wanted to say something.
Just
It's
a
been
comment.
seconded?
Just a comment. Even if, I get approval now, doesn't mean in January or February I'm going to hire somebody. I have to wait, number one, for the work plan, the final work plan version, and then, it takes time, to find the right person. It may take 3 months to 4 months before even I can find somebody and hire somebody. So
Okay.
we have chance to evaluate that.
Mr. Crothers.
Yeah, Madam Chair, if I can just clarify, we've not spent $400,000 developing the strategy. The line in the budget is $40,000 for consultants for doing that work. And that work, if you look forward in 2010, reduces down to $10,000. So that's the work around developing the strategy for the service, $40,000. In terms of the other consulting lines, those other consulting lines that Director Sebring referred to are very specific consultants under hydrometric and climatic monitoring, watershed management strategies. So they're all under very specific technical lines in the service. They're not the same consultants that we're using to develop this strategy. That's accounted for under general operating expenditures.
Thank you, Mr. Crothers. Someone told me that there was a seconder for Director Smith's, Director Salmon. So the motion is, could you read it, Ms. Legault? Because I can't quite remember.
Thank you. I believe the motion is that the Tier 2 supplemental request for the senior environmental analyst be deferred pending receipt of the watershed protection strategy.
Okay, so I have a speaker's list, but now we have a motion. So to the motion, Director Acton.
I already spoke.
Okay. I have Director Stone.
So, yeah, and I actually, I gotta say, Director Smith, when she was speaking, I was like, no, 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 and then I found some wisdom in there that this budget actually doesn't need to be fully approved until after we received that report. Very sly over there. And so I'm not as against the motion
Very
as I would
clever.
have been. But I do want to say, and I'm glad, I was kind of looking over your shoulder, I apologize, because I was looking for that report, because I remember reading it already, and it was very technical subsections for those consultants. So even though the line items stay the same, it sounds like some of the consulting work will be very different in 2020 as we move into implementation of technical work that, as Mr. Hatami has already explained to us, is not the role of our staff member. The role of our staff member is enough technical skill to manage the comings and goings, but with much more specialized technical skill on the ground. I just want to go back again to the establishment of the function. For those of us who were either in the audience and very interested or on the board before, there was a much larger budget that was originally proposed. As we kind of refined it because of concerns about cost, it became very lean in efforts to make something that the board could support moving forward, which is what happened. The referendum passed. So I think that I support the concept of establishing this service, but I think it does stand to reason that once we receive the report, which is the strategy, and I believe also the work plan, then we'll have an idea of when that person can be hired, because if we receive that in January, it still takes a couple of months to go through the hiring process if you're successful in getting the right candidate. And then at that time, I would recommend to staff, just as a side note, be prepared to reconvene this discussion once the plan has been presented to the board or the committee at that time. So I'll actually support this motion.
Director Nicholson. Director Staples, did you want to speak? You haven't spoken very much. I'd love to hear what you have to say if you'd like to. Okay. So I call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Pardon? It carries. So that motion carries. So staff will bring this back to us once the report comes from the, whatever that committee's called. Okay, so let's soldier on here, because I think we could get through this if we are a little lean of tongue.
All right, so back to the one that I mistakenly brought up earlier. So the next two go hand in hand together. They are one full-time position to assist with commuter transit and transit, funded 33% by commuter transit and 67% by transit.
Director Atkin?
Thank you, Madam Chair.
And Director Staples.
Do we have a total where we're at right now? I think of all the items that we care about, I hope that transit is one of them. So I would like to have the discussion of how, this is how we support. I don't know why I'm getting so many strange looks. But,
do you know where the number is? Okay. She knows the number. Let's
I think
let her say it.
transit is pretty important, so that's what,
Ms. Solder, where are we at?
based on the discussions we've had thus far today, we are now at 4.64 as a total.
Thank you.
Remembering that varies between each electoral area and municipality.
I'm sorry, I missed the last bit.
Just remembering that it varies between each electoral area and municipality, but
Absolutely.
overall, 4.64. That's not in there, no.
Director Staples?
It would be helpful, perhaps, because one of the things I notice as these come up is the silence around the table. If there could be just a brief introduction of staff to what it is we're speaking to, because that seems to be when we actually start to have
Yeah,
discussion
very good
around
point.
this. So I would just like to pose that as a way forward, so we can avoid all the pausing and the waiting. And so there's that piece of that, and I don't even know if I should say anything, because I would rather there be some sort of a motion on the table to discuss this further, because the last one that we just passed is also not going to be in the budget, but it's going to come up later, so anyways.
Yes,
I
a
just
lot
feel
of
like
time
this is
went-
a very clunky way of addressing all of this.
So could a staff member just give a little overview of this, please?
Mr. Olsen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So speaking on behalf of Mr. Wakeham and the Transit Division, another division that has some capacity challenges. Currently in transit, there is one full-time and one half-time position dealing with the initiative. So what they're finding is that they're stretched to do all of the planning as well as handle all of the day-to-day operations of inquiries, website, all of that. The board has move forward with some of the transit initiatives, including connection discussions with RDN. And so transit staff are challenged to do that without some additional capacity. What this position is a transit analyst to handle that day-to-day operation. Again, split between function 106 and 107.
Director Stone?
At this point, though, function 106, 107 are all allocated by assessment, are they not? Yeah, so we could probably just have one transit function, but that's how it established and evolved. I appreciate that we have a global number, but there's a dramatically different impact. Most of the stuff that we've done is regional. So, for example, I know on my budget, I don't even want to know what the number is, but once we know that number, I think it's going to, what would be the timeline to be able to get a number that would show the impact to each area? May I suggest a 5-minute break? We're coming
Absolutely.
up on another 90 minutes at the table anyway.
Yeah, let's have a 5-minute break.
Thank you.
What's the 90 minutes? Another 90. Because I was going, what the heck?
It's actually my kid.
You can do it? You can figure it.
See, that's the independent nature of Area H residents.
Well, yeah, they use someone else's. Area E did that for, no,
They just sit there and.
Oh, he lives in Laser.
Lauren Duncan did that for a long time.
Now, if I put this like spot.
Yeah, there we go. Likely it would.
Did you like this million? Just ignore it. He was already in meetings and I came down right here.
That was what you were looking for.
That's why decision making now is.
Yeah.
Message back saying, that was very nice, but
It's a request for. He thought that you did read. It was this Ladysmith guy.
He thinks because he's chairman, they're here.
Well, he takes the 2 for 1 for you approach.
No, that's not gonna be good as chairman.
Oh, well, you know.
He actually gave you one?
Well, actually, I had to. Pretty much.
Do you think we might get through? Sorry, there's what?
Do you think so? They said no by not moving.
Oh, I see. So we do have to come back to that. I'm just following Talita because that's what we've talked about. And I asked me to do that because it's so complicated. So sorry, I didn't realize that. I don't know anything about.
Well, that one for long got a kick.
Really good.
Yes, I need the practice. No, it's this one, it's Greg.
That's a big book. That's why it's over here. But it does. That's fine, I'm still in time. There used to be a preset over to my station. I had it pay for here and there, and we knew, you know, so it felt nice to get $10,000. Like we're paying 30, 50. Oh, the Prince George one when it was on, it was somehow voice activated because you were talking on your mic. Actually, that is not. It's like, it's actually close. Or the South California system. You got that on
Very subtle, very subtle rip.
So everything I just said is probably not in the video.
Thanks to me, man.
That's bad.
What's red when you're talking financials? You're in the red.
Oh,
You're in the hole. You're in debt.
You're even letting us watch you work. It's worked really Now we can see the magic unfold.
Yeah.
No pressure.
Black and white. You notice Talitha and I are both black and white?
Well, wear my nice shoes, not
Because
you're finance people, you're always black and white.
No, no, no. You don't wear red on budget days.
Oh.
Oh, you don't wear, I thought you were supposed to wear red.
You don't even.
Because it's like a bull, right?
Oh,
It's
yeah, yeah.
attractive.
No, you're black if you're in the black, or if you're in the red.
Ah, okay.
Finance people, eh? Finance
Yeah,
people.
not kidding.
If you went up upstairs, hardly anyone. There's no red. No. Maybe we didn't give you the memo.
Maybe.
Okay,
All right.
All
So,
right.
As of right now, as I mentioned before the break, we're at 4.64, so that's column G here on the screen. Just in anticipation of the question, if you were to approve the full-time transit officer in both functions 106 and 107, that's column H.
which would be what? Because I can't read.
So that would be 4.86 total, so that would be the difference.
Director Stone.
Just to move things along, I would move that that position be approved for both functions.
You seconding it? Okay. Anybody want to say anything about it, Director Acton?
Yes. So I want to support transit, and I do wish that we had done our strategic planning, because then we could focus where we want to allocate the funds, but we haven't. So, but my question is, are these positions going to help increase ridership and perhaps help us get more bus routes? So that in the end, because that would be the ultimate thing, is have more people riding the bus.
Who would answer that question? Mr. Elzinga?
I'll attempt to answer that, Madam Chair. It will certainly help with route and route planning. So as for ridership, that's a harder question to answer. So they will certainly be involved in promotion, marketing, all of that sort of initiative, and will free up the current transit analyst to do a lot more in terms of planning and marketing.
And planning would include looking at routes and
There's-
times that people would ride the bus.
These are major routes like the connection to RDN. There'd be some route planning, particularly around the new hospital site, as well as identifying current performance standards. So it is my understanding that the South Cowichan area is an area where there's some performance evaluation going on right now.
Thank you. Yep.
Can I also just ask how many people work in our transit department?
So within the transit division, Mr. Wakeham is half-time transit, half-time facilities, and we have one other full-time person, Rochelle Rondo. So 1.5 people to do transit at this point.
Anyone else? Shall I call the question? All in favor? Opposed? I think that carries. Carry on.
So the last item on the agenda is function 488 Shawnigan Basin Society. And so the motion was made at Electoral Area Services Committee to bring this forward to this committee.
So I think we kind of agreed that it would be good to get a little bit of background. So who from the staff could tell us a little bit about this? Or is it too political?
This is a grant function, so it would be the area director would be the expert.
Okay. Could Director Acton,
Sure.
could you
Sure.
speak to this?
The requisition is at 0. This is not easy for me. I've been to Mr. Evans' house, had drinks with him and his wife. I've stood shoulder to shoulder with Sheila. I've taught Suzanne's grandson how to water ski. These, this is not easy for me, but the community does not support overhead and rent when the community center is free, and that's been the request in their budget, and that was the same budget that we denied last year. That's all. So I move that we approve the budget as it is.
You're seconding that? No? We need a seconder to get, okay, it's seconded.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was gonna call you Director Blaze.
Better than Dr. Blaze?
He probably is Dr. Sandman.
I just have to wade in, even though it's not my area, but I just have difficulty supporting 0 for this group that, full disclosure, I used to be part of the Shawnigan Research Group, which is now folded in, and a lot of really valuable work is done and continued to do. So I just think given all we've heard, a small amount of base funding is warranted, and it's a vote of confidence for a group that does a lot of good work in the community and shares the space with other groups. So that's me.
Director Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'm the same. I have absolutely no wish to cross any boundaries here. But my greatest fear that with groups like this who have a huge amount of history and a huge amount of experience and data that they've collected over the years might be lost to the Shawnigan Lake community, but not only to them, but to the whole of the Cowichan Valley. This history, the expertise, and it's all been provided by volunteers, and I fully appreciate that, you know, the amount of money that's being spent on the rent of the place is a big issue here. I would love to find some way of retaining their expertise and their huge amount of, and I can't find the right word for it, but is there any way that we can fund their group, not to the extent that they're asking for, but in some way so that we can help them out, either through the watershed protection referendum 532, I think, but somewhere along the lines that we need to help and retain what they've achieved over the years.
Director Stone.
So I'm really sensitive to this, and I know that both Shawnigan Basin and the Cowichan Watershed Board have been examples that I've looked to as we deal with water issues in our area. But I know that through our municipal support for many community organizations, we absolutely would not fund overhead of an office. We would provide in-kind services through our community centers or municipally owned buildings. But when we're talking about an allocation, and a significant portion of that, not the majority, but a significant portion would be going to rent in a commercial building, I couldn't support that. However, I would support the ongoing work. I would support working with the director to see if there's places that are available, and I believe that there are in the Shawnigan community where the work can take place, where meetings can take place, where storing of data and important things can take place. And I fully support the intent of the group and the work that they do. But just as a policy, we would never support either ongoing operational funding or ongoing overhead through any kind of a community grant function. And I believe in those principles, and I wouldn't be able to support it from that perspective.
Director Smith.
So I have a question to staff. When we give a grant and aid to the Cowichan Watershed Society, are those funds used for, where's their office, and is there rent involved in their office? Can someone, I'm not familiar with all their.
Mr. Carruthers.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The funding goes to the Cowichan Watershed Board Society. They don't operate an office per se, I don't believe, but it does fund some of their administration operating costs in conjunction with Cowichan Tribes. They also provide funding. So in that case, we do.
So can I have a follow-up? Where are they situated then, the Cowichan Watershed Society? Where is their office?
Madam Chair, they don't have an office. They work remote. They work remotely. They have an office. Oh, sorry, the society?
Yeah, I'm asking if the Cowichan Watershed Society, who receives a grant and aid out of our watershed protection, drinking water and watershed protection, do they have an office, and is it something they pay rent for?
So, Madam Chair, I might be speaking out of turn. I don't believe they have an office. Director Nicholson would.
They work, Jill, I think the formal address is Jill Thompson's house, where she works, has an office in her basement. And Tom, you can find at the Twisted Mug quite often at his table.
So just on the rent issue, I don't think CVRD has that policy about rent. I mean, this was fully funded for several years and started as an AAP. So rent was paid, I assume, during that time. And just a second comment. I don't believe this would be a tax increase, as I believe the director's going to be funding their core activities out of grant and aid.
Dave Monday, the president of the Basin Society, did actually have a water quality attainment program proposed, and a lot of that is coming out of the watershed function. Our watershed function that we have. No, the main one, the new one. Yes, that's where it was suggested that it would come from in his budget proposal. And speaking with Kate Miller, a lot of that would come out of there. When he's on the technical committee, so we will be working with Ministry of Environment and CVRD.
Director Nicholson.
Could I move an amendment to provide them with $25,000 of basic support?
Is there a seconder? It's a seconded.
So essentially, you're moving to raise taxes in Area B when we've been.
Excuse me, it is I know you're frustrated, but this isn't the time for you to speak. Thank you.
Is this, can you read your motion again?
I'd like to amend the current motion, so instead of it being zero requisition, it's $25,000 for the Shawnigan Basin Society.
That's clear, thank you. So that is raising the taxes in Area B for overhead and rent. And so obviously I won't be supporting that. And $25,000 may not sound like a lot, but that is somewhere equivalent to like $400,000 regionally. So this is, the community center is free and we do fund it. And there's ample space. All the groups use it, groups that they speak with and partner with. So the APC, et cetera.
Excuse me. I don't want to have to ask you to leave, Sheila. Director Nicholson.
Yeah. Maybe it's the end of the day and I'm getting tired, but I feel so strongly that our community is out there doing really important work on water. And for some reason, we seem to be having a difficult time supporting community. And I think that they've received the message that we would prefer they not spend funding that we provide to them on rental, but they still will require basic operating. It would help them operate basically to have an assistant or provide their insurance or whatever it is so that they can continue delivering programming. You know, it's such good value having our community out there doing this kind of work. And, you know, we have talked all day about the importance of keeping our taxes affordable for our community. And we need to think outside of the box about how we deliver programming. And here we have community members with quite a bit of expertise, and yet we aren't willing to partner with them, to meet them halfway. And so I just, you know, I know that I'll probably wear the repercussions of this for a while around the table, but honestly, I think it's the right thing to do.
Director Staples and then Director Stone.
So if there is an issue around, or not an issue, but is there a way that the CVRD or the area director, or however this would work, could work with the society to come up with a space provision like you're suggesting, or what I believe I hear you're suggesting, and so that this $25,000 doesn't have to go to rent, and that space is provided in some other way? Can we make that part of the motion? Because that, unless I'm hearing this completely wrong, then what I believe I'm hearing is that it's Director Acton saying that this shouldn't be going, money shouldn't be going to rent, that there's space available. So is there a way to work with both of those things, that the space is provided plus the $25,000 to go to support their operating costs? That's what I'm asking.
So
For clarification, because I'm a bit confused, because it seems like there's
Yep.
some underlying things that,
I think there's a challenge here because I think I heard Director Acton say that it's her belief that Ms. Miller, who is Kate Miller, who isn't here, has indicated, she believes that she's indicated that some of this funding would go through the watershed function. We don't know that. We haven't, I'm not saying that she's not telling the truth, but I'm wondering if this might be something that we would table as we did the position.
can I just do a follow-up to what I was asking? Because I think, again, if that is the case, that's fine, but that I don't see necessarily as part of what we're talking about here. I see that as quite specific to work that is going to be done, right? This is more to provide foundational funding, $25,000 for basic operations. So what I'm asking is that possible to do that? And at the same time, make sure that there is some room, space available if we have it through the regional district, as I believe I heard Director Acton say, so that that's part of this. What happens through the watershed function later is something we discuss later. It doesn't have anything in my mind to do with the motion that we're talking about at the moment.
Yeah, I can't answer that question. I'm kind of stymied as to what to do here.
It does have to do with the motion because the budget that was presented to us, part of it was overhead. The other part was a proposed water attainment program. And that's where that program is partly being funded. So we're not being presented with a $25,000 project-based budget. This is absolutely ridiculous.
Director Morrison. Oh, I had Director Stone, sorry. No, don't be sorry. I'm the one that's losing it.
No, and I want to do a Director Smith resolution because I feel like there may be some, no, I'm not going to, but I feel like there may be some clarity once we get this presentation from the Drinking Water, because the work that is performed by Shawnigan Basin Society and the research group, I believe, and again, this will be a fight we have later, does belong on the watershed protection function. That's really what it was established for. And we've talked about this ad nauseum, that there's other NGOs within the district that we will also find the opportunity to work with because, as been stated in the motion, this is actually where we multiply the value of the cost, right? So if there's work that can be undertaken at a huge discount because we have an activated citizens group, we need to enable them to do that. So it's absolutely important. I'm not sure that this resolution is entirely in order. I would like to hear from Ms. Miller. It's really unfortunate that she's not here for this critical part of the meeting today, but I believe that if we look at the drinking water and watershed protection function, that funding for a group like this would belong there. So I'm just hesitant to support a motion that would require requisition from somewhere else before we have an opportunity to look at that.
Director Morrison.
Thank you. I'm going to bring forward the great work of the Cowichan Lake and River Stewardship Society, and they have received a very small bit of grant funding from taxpayers of electoral area F. They've been around about 10 years. They have run amazing shoreline protection enhancement, replanting projects. They've had budgets of hundreds of thousands of dollars, and they do not have an office. They do not have a paid executive director. They have taken on water quality testing. There's people out there on boats. They do fundraising. They're hovering around 100 members, and they don't receive core funding from the regional district. And I just bring them up as an example of good works that are done that are not based on core funding from the taxpayer. But this is, to me, this is more a question of this committee and ultimately the board forcing an electoral area director to tax a residence against her wish. And that's what it boils down to. It's as simple as that, whether it's 25,000, 5,000, or 50,000. We will be telling that director that, that we are going to force her to tax her taxpayers for this. And she's the elected official at the table. Thank you.
Question's been called. On the amendment, can you please read it for us, Ms. Legault?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The amendment is to include funding of $25,000 for the Shawnigan Basin Society in the 2020 draft budget.
All in favor? Opposed? That's defeated. Ms. Legault, main motion?
That function 488 Shawnigan Basin Society 2020 draft budget be approved.
Question's been called. All those in favor? Opposed? Oh, after the, okay. So I can't, carried. Thank you. Yes.
So I would like very much that this be, this discussion of this budget item be referred to the discussion around drinking water and watershed protection, because I think this very much fits within that. Now, we can quibble about the details on office space and overhead and pay the executive directors. As that gives us some time, we don't adopt the budget until I believe we can have that discussion. And I would be fully supportive of having this work reside within that function, along with others in the region. So I just want to find some way that we don't lose track of this, and we have the opportunity to discuss how we work with Shawnigan Basin Society and the research group through the function that we've established for the purpose. So I'm just asking through to Ms. Legault or staff how we would make sure that that conversation comes back, or through to the CAO.
Mr. Carruthers.
Yeah, I think in all fairness, a motion may be in order to make sure that that comes forward.
Refer to the discussion on drinking
Yeah.
watershed protection work plan.
Correct.
So I would make the motion that the funding for the Shawnigan Basin Society and Research Group be referred to the presentation of the drinking water and watershed protection work plan and strategy.
So that's moved by, I already had a seconder, sorry. Well, seconded by Wilson and Staples. You have something to say? Yes.
So I'm concerned that we're now setting up priority groups for the work that we're asking the organizational group to put together. I think that you know, to put one group, say we'll put them in line, and we'll say that, you know, the Cowichan Lake group and then the North End group. This is setting up for a bunch of people lining up for funding and in advance, and we haven't even got what the report is recommending. So I'm concerned about us trying to solve this problem and perhaps unintentionally creating another.
So I'll check with Director Stone, but my reading of his intention was to have this issue discussed when that report comes. It didn't say to take the money out of that fund. Am I right? Yeah, please do, but make it brief, please.
Yeah, well, I move the motion. I get an opportunity to speak to it, so I'll wait for my line in the speakers.
Well, you're the next one.
Thank you. So the discussion that I want to bring forward is discussing it. I get a sense from Director Acton that there's been discussions with Ms. Miller, who's bringing forward the work plan, that, and we've discussed many times that NGOs and these community groups would be a portion of it. I believe the draft budget said something smaller, around $50,000, I think, in the first year of work, but I don't remember those numbers. The reality is that we need to have that discussion at the board. The work of these kinds of groups is from my perspective, and we can have this debate when the time comes, but this is the kind of work that we're looking to leverage from our community group. So feel free to vote against it if you believe differently, but I think that that would be the appropriate time to have that discussion, and it may very well be that those kind of allocations are in that budget. If not, then we deal with that when it comes.
Director Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As you know, I've had my my struggles with water in my area as well, and I finally had, and now we've agreed that we're going to be doing something about it. There is nothing more important in this life than water, and if somebody's willing to step up and do the work that they've done, by all means, fund them.
Director Smith.
Thank you. I attended a meeting that was hosted by the CVRD in regards to the drinking water and watershed protection. It brought together the majority of the NGOs within the CVRD, and it was a very valuable meeting that was held, and people went away from that meeting believing that they were going to be part of the drinking water and watershed protection, and that they would be allocated funds to continue the work that they could do to support this function. And now we're sitting at the table. Those people went away from that meeting, and they went out to their communities and invited people to vote for the referendum in belief that they would have an opportunity to fill a gap. And instead of us collecting 1.4 million, as was originally proposed, that the 750,000 was more reasonable, because they would be able to fill a gap that would be costing us money. So I think it's really important that NGOs be recognized, and I hope that we can all move forward in that, within that budget at some point. But those people went away believing that they were going to be part of that function, that they were going to be receiving funds, and the only ones that's receiving funds is the Cowichan Watershed Society. And others are still wanting to know when their turn is coming, so we need to respect that.
Mr. Carruthers, is that correct, that there's only one group receiving money from that? I'm sorry, Director Smith, but it's important to me that what gets out there is the facts, so.
Yeah, my understanding currently, we had an obligation to the Cowichan Watershed Board currently, but as Director Smith mentioned, many of those same representatives that attended that meeting that she was at are also on this Technical and Community Advisory Committee that will be presenting a recommendation to the board around how this strategically should be spent, these funds. So they're actively engaged in this process currently.
Okay, so I feel like there's a lot of emotion happening, and it's very draining, and I'd like to know if it's okay to call the question on this. Do you need the motion to be read? Could you read the motion, please, Ms. Legault?
Thank you, Madam Chair. That funding for the Shawnigan Basin Society be referred to discussion of the water and watershed protection strategy.
All in favor? I just called the question.
Well, I think there's more people that want to speak to it.
So the chair can't call the question?
The process is, you need a motion to call the question with a second, or you need a 2/3 majority. That's what Robert
Okay,
says.
well,
I'm just saying, and you're welcome to do that as chair.
I'm happy to hear from you,
Okay,
Director
I
Sebring.
just-
You don't need to be passive
No,
aggressive in your tone.
It's
I'm just trying to get
I'm
people
sorry,
moving along.
It's late in the day. I'll keep it brief.
Okay.
I appreciate Director Stone's intent here. You know, what he said before he made the motion was, I'd like to find a way to make sure this comes up again. And if this is the best way to do that, I'll vote in favor of this motion. But there's a whole bunch of things that need to be discussed when this watershed management function comes back. I mean, I'm under some pressure is the wrong word, but constant reminders from my council that we have an issue with Quamachin Lake. And I'm not going to make a motion to make sure that Quamachin Lake comes up in discussion, but you can bet I'm going to bring it up in discussion when this thing comes forward. There's a whole slew of
Yeah.
issues that.
I think
so-
we're all aware of that,
so,
but thank you for reminding us.
I'm just saying, this one is a little bit unusual because of the motion, but I don't think that makes it special. It doesn't preclude any of the others of us from.
No, it wasn't meant to.
From banging the drum.
It wasn't meant to do that. Director Acton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree with Director Sebring. The topic will come up when we discuss that, because the president of the SBS, Dave Monday, is on that technical committee. And if there is a reason to increase the requisition, I will be bringing that forward, because he's actually away until tomorrow, and I will be meeting with him before that time.
Okay, so are we now ready for the question? And according to the procedure geek in my world, we need a mover and a seconder to call the question. I see. Okay, well, I've learned something. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. That was painful. Do I get double time for that one?
So if I may, Chair.
Yes, please.
Just for clarification, so.
Director
I've heard-
Stone.
I've heard a few times today people saying we don't have to adopt the budget until March. Absolutely true. Our intention would be, given that the majority of items have currently been discussed, our intention would still be to bring the bylaw forward for approval in December, so that we can then begin work on all of the capital projects. The intention of the Finance Department is to be bringing forward a budget amendment in February to deal with all of the, we have deficits at the end of the year, we have project carry forward, so we would typically bring forward a budget amendment before the requisition deadline. And so, because if we waited till March, then we'll need separate requests for all of our capital projects to give pre-budget approval. So, so I just wanted to make sure that I'm not going to be surprising anybody if I do bring forward the financial plan bylaw prior to discussion of the drinking water and watershed protection function.
Thank you. Director Stone.
So it'll be key to recognize that that would not include the funding for that position.
Absolutely.
Right, so then we would amend the budget, and we could roll it up in the other amendments that would come from actually knowing what, will we know by that time what our operating reserves from 2019 would be?
Absolutely.
Okay, so that'll give us a lot more clarity that we can judge that with. Thank you.
So then I guess we're now just about to question period, right?
Thank you all for hanging in there today, and
Yeah,
you get a day
and-
off tomorrow.
And before I go to question period, I know you're all really, really tired, but there's something that Director Stone, there's something that the mayor of Duncan says at the beginning of every meeting, and I don't know all of it. I don't even know most of it. But the gist of it is that we're all here because we care about our community, and we want to make good decisions, and that includes the people that are in the gallery. And sometimes we don't agree, and sometimes we even get triggered by each other, which I don't think she quite says it that way. But I hope that we can realize that everyone is coming from what their values and what they really believe is right, and we can carry on the next time we meet with no hard feelings, and I'm very hopeful of that. So having said that, question period.
Hello, Sheila Bell Irving, very disappointed to you. Does the CVRD have control over how groups spend their tax funds?
How groups?
Does the CVRD have control over how groups spend their tax allocated funds?
I think so, but I don't know that answer. Mr. Keeper, could you answer that?
Well, last time I tried to answer a question for the chair, I got my hand slapped, but I'd love to answer
I'm
it.
not a hand slapper.
At the end, my answer is yes, the CVRD does have control of that. The CVRD gives funds under certain conditions. If the organization that is supposed to receive the funds do not use the money in that way, the CVRD will withhold those funds. They've done it in the past, and they have that prerogative.
So yes, the answer.
Okay, got that. Question number 2. Do you have any idea how hard it is to find space for a 24-foot long table and maps in a 3D map? No room at the community center. can tell you that. Sierra suggested we cut the table into smaller pieces.
What is your question?
My question is, how can you take away a tax allocation that was voted on? It was voted on by the community. How could you take it away? It was voted on. You had an AAP. I voted on it.
I honestly don't know that answer either. Thank you, Mr. Keeper.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the functions that that ultimately people approve and the board adopts is, do you approve funding up to? Doesn't mean the top figure. It means it gives the boards the discretion to fund anywhere from 0 up to the max. So the board in the past, look what they just did with Parkland acquisition. In addition to that, with the water function, the board is not required to go to the top.
Okay. $25,000, which was suggested, is a quarter of Area B grant and aid, and she says it's too much. Really? Here's my question. Do you have any idea how?
You need to ask, try and
Do you have
hold your
any?
feelings and just ask a question that you really need the answer
Do you
for.
have any idea how rude it is to say this is ridiculous? Do you?
I think that I'll
And
have to ask you to
how can we
step down.
apply for grant and aids?
I think you know that. You've done it before, right?
I haven't.
Okay, I would suggest you contact staff tomorrow and they will let you know.
Thank you.
Although I don't think we have grant and aid anymore,
And
do we?
hopefully people will help us out.
I guess you have to find out how you do that to your area director. Thank you for your
Right.
questions. Does anyone else have any questions?
Madam Chair, I'm Cliff Evans from Shawnigan Lake. Very disappointed in this committee. After all the work we've done over years and years, we've had an AAP.
Do you have a question, Mr. Evans? Because
yes,
this
I
is
do.
similar to your input at the public input.
Madam Chair, why does the CVRD ask the Shawnigan Basin Society to carry out tasks and not support us? We spend thousands of dollars on gas, time, and we give you the information, so why do you ask us to do anything and not support us? That's not right.
So if I could answer to the best of my ability, it's my understanding that the board, through your area director, has supported you for quite a number of years, and that it's being perhaps going to be considered under this new watershed function.
I believe I was at a meeting, and you were too, and the people around here were, when Kate Miller, Miss Miller, did she not state that that was regional money and that she wanted the Shawnigan Basin Society to bring their money and their expertise to the regional area?
I have a recollection of something like that, but I'm not sure exactly what it was. But do you have one more question, Mr. Evans?
Yes, I do. Madam Chair, does anyone here, any of the directors, would they like to make a donation to the Shawnigan Basin Society? We can give you a tax receipt for anything over $200, and we'll accept any denomination.
Thank you, Mr. Evans.
Thank you.
Motion to adjourn. All in favor? Carried. Thank you, everyone.